Bay Buccaneers from the 48-yard line. Second down, 13. Brady lobs one downfield. Caught ball by Gronkowski inside the 20 to the 15-10. Gronkowski to the 5 to the 4-yard line. Holy guacamole.
Third down, 18. Dropping Gannon, looking Gannon. Those up the middle. It's intercepted at the 40. Derek Brooks 30. Brooks to the 25, 20. Derek Brooks all the way. There it is. The dagger's in. We're going to win the Super Bowl.
Super Bowl, baby!
This is the Big Nasty. Yeah, Big Nasty. Hall of Fame Tampa Bay Buccaneer fan, baby.
This is Mike Allstott, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and you're listening to the Cannon Fire Podcast.
Cannon Fire Podcast, brother. You ain't listening, and you're missing out. Woo!
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to a very special edition of the Cannon Fire Podcast. Back at you today for episode 169, which also happens to be our season review show. Normally we record this show like a full month earlier, but I mean, obviously we saw how the 2020 campaign turned out, and we're going to be here to try our best to put it into words. I'm your host, as always, Rhett Matthew, joined alongside me, my good buddy and co-host, the Philly Bucs fan himself, Mr. Evan Wanish. How you doing, Evan?
Doing pretty good, and yeah, you're right. Normally this is something that we're actually on like a little bit of a break right now. Normally we're not really doing many shows, and then just waiting for free agency and stuff, and this year was a little bit different.
Yeah, it really was. Buccaneers got to play all the way up until the first week of February, which, I mean, we all know how it turned out. Let's just go ahead and cut to the chase. We got a very special guest joining us for the season review show. Coming out of retirement one last time before he goes into his cave, rides his Peloton for the rest of eternity. Mr. Chris Fisher of the Bucs Brief Podcast is back on the show. How you doing, Chris?
What's up, gentlemen? It's good to talk to you all again. It's been a long time. I turned down a lot of offers through the year, and I'm very sorry for that. And I'm honored each time y'all ask me, and then I feel like a dick because I'm like, guys, I'm not into it. And then when Derek from What the Buck gave me the call and he was doing a show, and then the last show, I was like, fuck it, let's do it, guys. So I'm very glad to be with you both. I like your show. You guys do a great job. So it's my pleasure. And then, like you said, I'll probably disappear then for a long time, unless the Bucs win the Super Bowl next year. And then I'll be back for like Super Bowl recap.
Make your little media tour once again. Had a couple of stops along the way. Now, I mean, it's all good, man. I know that Evan actually told me, during the year, you are a guy, at least from what I've picked up, who likes to just be incredibly prepared. I think, when we ask you the same day, do you want to come on a podcast tonight, clearing up the schedule time and just, I don't know, getting prepared to break things down the way that you do. It's why your podcast was so good for as long as you had it. But, I mean, I'm glad that we could finally make this happen, and on the terms that we are here, Super Bowl champions.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, you all know it took a lot of effort to, you guys know what it takes to do a podcast. And, what's part of the reason that I stopped doing it is because of the amount of effort, because I wanted to be prepared, kind of shifted my philosophy on how I started the show versus how I got into a nice rhythm with it and wanted to be prepared. So, I don't want to come on your show. I don't want to go into another show and sound like an idiot because I wasn't paying as much attention to the football team or what was going on. So, but I always wanted to come back on with you all. Like I said, you have one of the only Bucs shows that I will actually listen to, because I've really tried to just steer away from all of the content. There's so much, and everyone does their own thing, but I like what you all do. I appreciate it. And I think I gravitate more towards your style of audio.
Hell yeah, man. Really do appreciate your support. It does mean a lot.
So now, you mean that you're just listening out of the 4,000 Bucs podcasts that are out there right now, that you only listen to like 2 or so?
Yeah, but you only have the one that goes, Cannon Fire Podcast, baby. You ain't listening.
That's right.
Well, I mean, you hear it in the intro every single episode. If you're not listening, you're listening out. Or Jesus Christ.
If you're not missing it, yep.
If you're not listening, then you're missing out. Listen, I'm a little taken back, because before we go into this, we do have some news that I think we would be remiss if we did not talk about. Former Bucs wide receiver Vincent Jackson passed away this week, and I think we just kind of need to take a moment to talk about this, because Vincent Jackson is one of those guys that you look at who is so much more than just a football player, especially in the Tampa Bay area. He had his hand in a little bit of everything with all the work that he did with military veterans, his charities, I mean, the guy was just everything that people love about Tampa, and I'm sure that I'm ripping that quote from somebody else, but it's very true. And, you know, for a guy like that to pass away at just 38 years old is really upsetting, but, I mean, got to show some respect for VJax, like I see Evan is doing with his background there.
Right. It's, you know, back in 2012, that's when, so I started really watching the team in 2011. That's when I really started getting into like football and stuff. And then 2012 though was the year that like I can remember like I was starting to really pay attention and I was starting to like know more and really pick it up. And a lot of that 2012 season was a lot of Vincent Jackson memories. And I know personally my family has really had, you know, I think all of us have Vincent Jackson jerseys. It was just sort of a family favorite and just shocking, you know, 38 years old. And, you know, it's a real shame. And not only, you know, did Tampa lose, you know, a great player that was on the football field, but also, like you said, in the community, he was so much more to everybody else in Tampa. And, yeah, it's a great guy and just, you know, still hard to believe.
Yeah, I wore 83 when I played receiver in high school and was always wanted Joe Jurevicius to come to Tampa, wear the 83. And I was a huge Vincent Jackson fan, even when he was playing with the Chargers, just thought he was a very underrated wide receiver. And it's one of those memories that I can think back to when, because we know as Bucs fans, typically our season is over.
Right.
And it's okay, free agency, who are we going to get? And when it was Vincent Jackson, it was like, oh my God, this is one of my favorite receivers in the NFL. This is awesome. He's a good character guy. Plus he's just a great player. He's going to do great things in the community. And it made the alarm clock jerseys look a little bit better when VJax was wearing them. So it sucks. It's awful. And you've seen a lot of if you follow social media or the news or how people have reacted to it. And it's such a sad story.
Absolutely. Now, we're going to go ahead and get into the show. For those of you who don't know, or for those of you who are new to this, the season review show, what it is, we spend a good chunk of time and we break down the 16 games that the Buccaneers played. The way that we're going to do it tonight, we're going to kind of break it up into quarters of the season. Then we'll talk about the postseason run and, of course, all the games that came along with it. But before we get into that, I need to remind everybody that this podcast is brought to you by our good friends over at betonline.ag. From game spreads and totals to team, player, and coaching props, BetOnline gives you more options to wager than any other place online. And, of course, they've always got the online casino, which never closes. So head over to betonline.ag today and take advantage of all the great sign-up bonuses. BetOnline, your online sportsbook expert. So, the time of year that it is right now, like we said, we're used to the season kind of ending a good month ago. And here we are. It seems like things have really picked back up when it comes to, you know, rumor season. And I guess we'll just kind of comment on this really quick. It is without a doubt rumor season in the NFL. The Buccaneers, one of those teams hot in a lot of talks right now. But, you know, I think the important thing to remember this time of year, and I'll toss it to you, Chris, is that a good, I don't know, 65, 70% of what you're going to see is just bullshit at this point. I mean, a lot of stories coming out now are either smoke screens or speculation. And I think it's just important to remind everybody to, I don't know, stay calm for at least a couple more weeks, right?
Well, I think you have to look at it different ways. You have to look at teams who leak, like the Carson Wentz situation. You have to look at, obviously, the Eagles want to put the news out there that they're getting these high offers for Carson Wentz when we know that that's bullshit, right? I mean, they're trying to improve his stock. Versus what we see now in Tampa, where obviously when you're a championship team, and obviously when Tom Brady is your quarterback and he's coming back and you have a lot of key components coming back, you're going to see these veterans that we're going to see linked to want to come play in Tampa. So I think it's a little bit different. And it's nice to be in a situation where obviously we want to keep our core players around. It's very important to retain a lot of the guys that I think they will bring back. But two, it's not like you have to go out and nail that top free agent, right? It's not like we have to go out and get a Tom Brady. It's what other players can you add to just improve what we saw this past season? Because as you know, look, I'm not downselling anything that this team did. They're Super Bowl champions. They can get even better.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So what components are out there and what are players willing to maybe take less for to come down and play for a championship? I think at this point, fellas, it's about finding the right fit for what you need for this team moving forward.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think those fits are like very like specific, and I mean that's what happens when you win a Super Bowl, right? Like, like that's what a lot of people are talking about the draft, and like obviously there's picks that like you don't feel like are as valuable, but like you're not sitting there saying, oh, the Bucs at 32 have to take this. They don't. Like, I'm a big guy that I think they should trade down, but I mean even if they pick somebody, like this is the first time like you may not see that rookie first round pick play a ton, right? He'll play a little bit, but like you won't see him possibly play a ton just because the roster is so loaded with depth for really the first time in a long time.
Yeah, it's a different situation versus Wirfs and Winfield, who came in from the last draft class, and you just had expectations that we knew Wirfs was going to start, right? I mean, clearly, and then Winfield, all accounts, like he's going to earn a starting spot. So it's a little bit of a different situation because they're in the mode now where you can start to add depth, right? And some of these positions where they're getting a little bit older, start adding some depth behind, and then really set yourselves up for just continuing what the team started this year, right? I'm one of those. I got this, this question when I did Derek's last show on What the Buck of, well, what would you trade? How many years would you trade now since you won a Super Bowl for the team not to win another? And I can't think that way because we haven't been in a situation where this team has done it consistently. I think that's what sets you apart in the NFL as being a good franchise, right? Not just a good team. We want in Tampa to build a good franchise where we see some consistency year after year, and we're in the playoffs. We experience things like Packers fans do, or Patriots when they had Tom Brady, right? You knew they were going to go into the playoffs every year. It's just, are they going to win the Super Bowl or are they going to get knocked out in the championship game? So that's what I'm hoping that we see here in Tampa moving forward.
And the
one guy I wanted to get just your thoughts on, Chris, because I know you brought it up and we've talked about it privately a bunch. As a free agent, James White, it's a natural fit. And that's when I talk about specific needs. Like, they don't necessarily need a running back one, but they could use a pass catching running back. And I think White fits that bill. So what do you think about that?
Well, if we deep dive the situation that the Bucs have at running back, and again, James White is 30 years old. I'm not saying it's the right fit, but there is a comfortableness with our quarterback right now. Is he at 30 years old a guy that can stay healthy and obviously serve in that third down back role? And I'll talk about that in a minute. Or do you already have a guy in-house in Keyshawn Vaughn that you drafted that you feel comfortable enough with that you don't go and bring in a 30-year-old running back? It seems clear to me, and please don't take this as a knock on Ronald Jones. I feel the staff had tried for the entire year to replace Ronald Jones. And if you don't agree with that, then follow the moves that were made coming into the season. Yeah. LaShawn McCoy was never going to replace Ronald Jones as the premier back, right? And we don't really have many of those in the NFL anymore. They drafted Keyshawn Vaughn. Then in the third round. Yeah, and then they bring in Leonard Fournette. So, and Rojo just continued to show up and I think played very well from the lead back role. Obviously, there's some improvement that needs to be made, which is if he's not good catching the ball out of the backfield. We saw many examples of that. If they don't trust him in pass protection, right? If the handoff isn't going to be then to Vaughn to serve in that role, if they don't trust him enough and he had some turnover issues his first year, then it makes sense to bring in a veteran running back. Adrian Peterson's been mentioned. James White has been mentioned. So it really depends, I think, on what Jason Light and the organization wants to do, because I wouldn't put drafting another running back as something that is far-fetched at this point, because if we go back, it looks like they're still trying to replace Ronald Jones. And I think Ronald Jones had a great year. He just doesn't have that total skill set of what they're looking for to do all those things that, that's why they have to add other components.
Well, and how many times this year throughout the regular season did everybody kind of put their hands on their heads and say, why are they throwing Leonard Fournette in right now? You know what I mean? So I guess it just kind of furthers exactly what you're saying there. I'm the type of person who believes that Ronald Jones can get it done for this team if you complement him with a pass-catching running back like a James White. I think Rojo is a great north-south runner. I think he's probably the best runner Oh, look, I got a gift from Zoom as a pop-up in the middle of my screen. That's cool. I think he's the best natural runner that this team has seen at the running back position since maybe a guy like Doug Martin. So, with that being said, I like to believe that, the Bucs have long-term plans for him, but at the same time, he also seems like a guy who's going to take his money, test the market next season, and sign with a team who's going to use him a little bit more. But, I mean, I think we all can agree that he just doesn't have any hands, and that's what prevents him from being that 3-down back that people want him to be. But that's just not what he's going to be at this point. And this coaching staff has kind of proved that as well.
I think so. I think all signs have pointed to that all year. You don't go out and sign Leonard Fournette if you're 100% comfortable with what you have in the backfield with McCoy, Vaughn, and Ronald Jones. So think of the plays that were missed. I know if we get frustrated as fans immediately during games and take to social media, but think of some of the games where there were key drops by running backs and close games. And if I remember correctly, the game against the Rams, we saw. I feel like that was a game where we saw a lot of drops from running backs. And if I'm wrong and if I got that game inaccurate, please, tweet at me and tell me that I'm an idiot. But that's why you want to go get someone with sure hands like a James White. I wish, and it just doesn't work out, that Nyheim Hines was coming off of his contract as unrestricted free agent, but he's got one more year left, because to me, he's young, 24. He's better than James White. That would be a guy that I would be like, oh my God, could you imagine him with Tom Brady in this offense? I think that would set the offense apart to be pretty spectacular. But unfortunately, guys have contracts, so he's got one more year left. So that's one of those covet. Hey, in one more year, if Brady comes back for another year and we're still churning along here, could that be a guy in free agency year? Would it be 2022, right? But I think running back is a position that they're going to continue to add to, whether that be through veteran or draft or both.
Ladies and gentlemen, for those of you just joining us, believe it or not, this is the season review show. We kick things off with a little bit of, rumors swirling around these past couple of days. You got to at least talk about it. But
the funny thing, I went back and listened to our one last year, and the first half hour, 35 minutes, is just Jameis Winston talk. That's all it was. So
not surprising.
And this is So this is kind of a theme. We'll get into it a little bit in a few minutes here, but yeah, we like to talk about a little bit about the future, because you're trying to win another one now, right? It's not about just getting one and then that was the Bucs' the Super Bowl in 2002 was the Bucs' last playoff win since this year. So don't want that to happen again. So and I think a big difference between that is, like you said about the depth, they're going to have their first round picks. Whereas when they won the Super Bowl in 2002, they didn't. So they didn't have those picks because they gave it for Gruden. So I think that's going to make a big difference as well.
That was the difference that year. And I made this point on What the Buck, is that you knew they sold out everything that they had for the future to win that one. And thank God they did, because imagine if that didn't happen,
man. Right.
So we knew anyone with logic, if they were a fan back then, would have the expectations like, oh, they're gonna struggle for a couple of years. And let's not forget that the draft classes, even with the guys that they brought in with Bruce Allen and John Gruden, maybe not the best evaluators from a talent standpoint, did not do much to help the team, right? If you have some of those guys that stick for more than 2-3 years of being an average to good football player, right? You could see potentially they could have been competitive, and then you add some veterans that just did not make a lot of sense. So you saw the direction that the team was going to head. This is a different situation. Obviously, you have an older coach, probably not that many years left. There's a lot of guys that are coming up on contracts soon, even some of the younger guys like a Carlton Davis. In a couple of years, you're going to have to bring back these guys and have the money to do so. But one of the things that the Bucs have in their favor at this point is depth at some key positions. Some young guys that they can groom behind some of these veterans, like an Aaron Stinney, right? And you still got Kappa and Wirfs. So you're looking at some of your offensive linemen are still relatively young. It's just, quarterback we'll see in a couple of years. Yeah. Tom Brady would never surprise me to play till he's 45 years old, but I mean, plyometrics, baby. So we'll see what happens, but yeah, completely different situation versus what we experienced for the first Super Bowl.
Now, while we're on the topic of what's current, I think one more thing that we should discuss before we really get into the review here is the other rumor floating around, and it has to do with a particular defensive lineman by the name of J.J. Watt. This one is, a little bit more open as well because there's a lot of other teams that are interested in him. Of course, you heard about Pittsburgh. They probably won't be able to make it work cap-wise, but right now you hear about Green Bay pitching an offer to him. Somebody had reported something about Cleveland throwing out a $17 million a year, which, would just crush it, but the Bucs are a team that's kind of heavy in those talks as well, and that goes back to what we talked about at the top of the show. You've got these veterans who are sick of being on shitty teams, want to come to Tampa, take a little bit less to win a ring, and J.J. Watt finds himself in that situation. So for a lot of people, I think you expect anywhere from like the $7 to $10 million range if the Bucs are throwing him an offer. But Evan, what do you think of the possibility of J.J. Watt?
Yeah, it's definitely interesting, and just like we talked about earlier, and you said, these types of players you're going to see linked to the Bucs. Quan Short was just released.
Yeah.
Obviously, I don't think it's going to happen, and I wouldn't do it. I know you're shaking your head there, Fish, but
don't need an aging 3 technique in this defense. It doesn't fit.
Yeah,
doesn't
exactly.
fit. 5 years ago, yeah,
sure.
Now,
sure.
no.
Yeah, he's a very good player, but and a lot of people could look at Watt and say, 5 years ago, yeah. But to me, he's a good fit in this defense, and he's the type of character that they want. He's the type of locker room guy, and talk about a leader. You would have some of the best leaders in the NFL, I think. So it makes sense from a Bucs perspective, and it makes sense from a Watt perspective. He's never been to a conference championship game. He's only ever been to the divisional round, and Houston is a complete dumpster fire right now. So get out of there. And can he make a bad choice? I don't think so, but I don't know if there's a better choice if the money's right than Tampa, just because of one, Todd Bowles, and two, a lot of the other defensive players that are here, just the talent that you'd be playing with, assuming they bring back Barrett and like Levante David, the talent that you'd be playing with could open up a lot for you. And, Tom Brady's on the other side, the other side of the ball. So I think it's definitely an intriguing thing for both situations, and we'll see what happens. I've heard some things, but we'll see. And I think you'll get a decision soon from Watt, but I don't know. I don't know how quickly it'll be. So,
yeah, I think a lot of Buccaneers fans probably didn't watch a lot of Houston Texans games this year, right? And why would you? They were god awful, but they have exciting quarterback in Deshaun Watson. We talked about when we kind of kicked into the free agency talk. We talked about now it's time to fit the player or find the players that fit the mold of this team, right? Moving forward. And sometimes that's regardless of age. J.J. Watt is dynamic. Still, is he the J.J. Watt from years ago? No, but I believe from an analytics standpoint, you're looking at one of the absolute worst defensive lines that he played on. Not on him. They're still doubling him at a completely.
He was one of the most double team defensive linemen in the NFL last year. Yeah.
Right, and not having a guy like Vita Vea, not having Shaq Barrett, if he's back, JPP, and then you've got the linebackers behind him. Would I want to sacrifice potentially adding some other components? That's where we could really dive in and say, well, what if you could get this player, and bring back this player and not have JJ Watt? Then we could have a conversation about it. I think the Bucs would be, if we look at potential targets, because not knowing JJ Watt personally, but he does ride a Peloton. So shout out to JJ Watt. He could come to Tampa and we could have competitions.
Does he have the branded shoes? Like, is he that down for the brand?
No. His output's not that good. What are you doing, JJ?
Oh, man.
By you, man. Come on. You're not even close to Booger McFarland. What's going on? He's not even playing anymore. But I think if you look at logically, just assuming what JJ Watt is looking for is he wants to go to a franchise or to a team that's very close to making a run for a championship. So you all mentioned the top 3 teams. I don't think Pittsburgh has a chance. I think Pittsburgh is a team on the decline versus the rise. Exactly. Maybe, and I might be wrong when it all plays out, but I think they're losing some players. I think Green Bay, Cleveland, and Tampa make the most sense. Cleveland's a team on the rise. Green Bay is a team that has Aaron Rodgers left for a couple of years, and we'll see what his decision is here in a couple of years when he becomes a free agent. But to me, those are the most logical.
I think
destinations.
Buffalo makes some sense.
Buffalo does as well, but Buffalo's a team who I think is going to go after a couple defensive linemen and Kawan Short. I would pencil in right now to be on Buffalo's roster next year. I think that makes a lot of sense.
Basically, the Buffalo Panthers up there.
Yeah, well, because you've got the familiarity there with the head coach, and then that's where when you start linking free agents, you dive into what coaches that he previously played for and what's the staff, and so I think it makes a lot of sense. The defense to me was a huge strength of this team. Inconsistent at times, but pretty much the most solid component of this team. They weren't as inconsistent as what we saw on offense, and that makes sense, right? You're bringing in relatively the same guys that you had the previous season outside of a couple. So that made a lot of sense, but I can't imagine how dynamic this team would be. Think about some of the things that they were able to do in the Super Bowl, where you put Vale on the outside and bring JPP in as to go against the guards. Todd Bowles would have a freaking field day.
He would love it.
And I guarantee you, anyone who plays fantasy football, you'd be seeing the Bucs drafted as probably the number 1 overall defense, or at least in the top 2, top 3 defenses off the board because of the potential for sacks and turnovers. So I like the idea of it. I don't care how old he is. We got our quarterbacks will go at 43 years old. Still playing at a high level, man. We proved already. JJ Watt's not 40 years old. He's got a lot of good play in him, and if you go back and look at his tape, it's going to show you he doesn't have a lot of good pieces around him. He could be a game changer on defense just to make it even better than what we saw specifically in the playoffs.
Let's go ahead and jump into this review. I think we've covered the rumor talk. We talked a little bit on the top of the show about expectations for this team this season, the expectations that they have set for themselves next season. Let's go way back to the spring when we just found out the Bucs had signed Tom Brady. What are your expectations then, Fisher? Were you one of those people who tried to keep it as realistic as possible, said that this team could make a playoff run, but will probably not make it to a conference championship, or that's the ceiling? Because I know that Evan and I both had them at 11-5. I'm pretty sure that I had them losing in the divisional round. I don't know where Evan had them.
I did too.
Yeah,
I had them. Actually, I had them beating Green Bay in the first round and then losing to New Orleans in the second round. So.
Yeah. So what did you have, Chris?
I think anyone who looks at this team objectively, and with logic and understanding the situation and the weird year that we've had with the pandemic and not having a legit training camp and preseason, I would think that I always used to say this on the podcast, like temper your expectations, right? I mean, I used to say that back in the day because it's a young quarterback, it's still a young team, it's a new coaching staff, it's all this, right? Yada yada yada, all these different excuses. I thought, and I think other people who cover the team have said this too, that this was their learning year. It was their year to get back into the playoffs, start gelling as a football team, and then really come out on fire the next season and be Super Bowl favorites. We had conversations. We'll be brutally honest. We'll DM you guys and I, or Evan and I, and Evan's taken over as the curmudgeon of Buccaneers fandom because I don't know how I get called a curmudgeon or that I have this negative outlook on the team. I mean, if they had a bad game, you're going to talk about they had a bad game. It's right. Not like you're rooting for them to lose. Yeah. But man, so
some people believe I am. So
okay, well that's fine. But Evan and I would have conversation because you keep it real. But that's come on, you don't blow smoke up people's ass. If they lost, if they got their ass handed to them by the Saints, they got their ass handed to them by the Saints. There's not much positive to talk about that week. And you guys cover the team now. I don't, right? So it's going to come off that you're negative or whatever, but whatever. That's a whole nother situation. But the team was 7-5, and we would have conversations. And I even told you all from a content standpoint, like it's potentially going to be the topic of conversation if they continue down that route of, wow, does this staff have what it takes to get this team over the hump, right? Tom Brady can't do it all by himself, or these players that they have can't do it all by themselves. And it completely shifted. And there's a point in the season where it shifted. I disagree with when some say that it shifted. But kudos to someone who predicted them to win the Super Bowl. I would think that they were speaking more of fandom and wanted to come off like, well, I said that they were going to win. No one else expected it. So now it makes me look even smarter, right? Yeah. But logic would say, this was going to be the learning curve year, get everyone on the same page, start to continue to add components to the team for next season, and then really be competitive for Super Bowl. But they went on a roll at the right time, man, and things all set up in the way they needed to be set up for this football team. And it worked out. And kudos to people who predicted them to win the Super Bowl. I did not. And I was pleasantly surprised because I root for the damn team. I don't want them to lose every week. They were a hard team to root for, y'all, for a couple years. And there's personal stories behind that. But, man, there were times I'm like, they lost. I mean, what the hell? I don't give a shit. But this coming into this year was different for me. It really was. Just the vibe felt different.
I think this Super Bowl hits differently for everybody who woke their ass up before 9 a.m. last season.
To watch London.
To watch 5 interceptions over the course of a game. I mean, that is the least fun I feel like you can have watching football before noon. Like, nobody wants to really get drunk at 9 a.m. and watch their team, you know what I mean? So a lot of people had to watch that game with a fresh mind, and for that to be the first thing that you woke up to, that's what made this team tough to watch, because for so many years it was 2 steps forward, 5 steps back, because they would just either shoot themselves in the foot or it wouldn't show up on the field, and nobody could really figure it out. It's a team that was cycling through coaches every 2 years, and I remember telling people who were like, oh, you need to just fire your coach. You're like, well, wait a minute, the system really hasn't kicked in yet. You got to give them at least, 4 years to see if it really pans out with these guys, and I mean, here we are. We talked about how sudden that change was for a team that was 7-9 just a year ago, to get to the Super Bowl and to win the damn thing. I mean, we knew that Tom Brady was going to come in here and take this team to another level, but the expectations this season were shattered, and I'm glad that you brought up that point at 7-5, because let's be honest, folks, how many people were picking the Bucs to win the Super Bowl against Kansas City at a 7-5 after they had just got absolutely walloped by New Orleans on their home turf? They lost to the Rams. They lost to the Chiefs. All of those games in Raymond James Stadium.
Yeah, they literally lost to the Chiefs. So who would pick them to beat the Chiefs eventually?
Nobody was at 7-5. Nobody was logically saying that this team could win out, set a franchise record for wins, and ultimately win the Super Bowl. And if you do,
all on the road,
I commend you. Well, I mean, they've been a team that always kind of plays strong on the road, so I like. I know, that
but
narrative,
playoff games, that's different.
I love that narrative came to light, and it's funny as well because we'll kind of transition here. Expectations with this team. I feel like even with Jameis Winston under center, we always said that if the Bucs got their chance in the playoffs, they would be a tough team to beat. And obviously, everything came together this season, but that's exactly what they saw, and they just shattered expectations.
Well, before you chime in, here's the difference, and I think people need to understand this. You all create Bucs content, and how you treat the situation when your team starts going on a slide. And this is just me, and this is just me who used to create content every week, and I was used to 2-14 and 6-10, and when the hell are they going to fire the coach? It's not that you all are coming out at a 7-5 and saying, fire Bruce Arians, fire Todd Bowles. There are those reactions from fans, and that's perfectly fine. You're a fan. You can say whatever the hell you want to say. You can think whatever the hell you want to say. But as content creators, what you all do is there has to come a time where you can at least sit down. You have a podcast where you discuss these things. So if you started saying it's 7-5 and they started to slide, like, look, there's a lot of question on this, if this offense is doing enough to take advantage of the weapons that they have, right?
Right.
Why aren't we seeing pre-snap motion? Why aren't we seeing more play action on first down? It's okay as a fan to question that, I feel. And you all as content creators and you guys on the Cannon Fire podcast, because that's why you listen, is that just potentially have that conversation of, does it make sense that we're at least looking and saying, this certain coach might not be working out? It's not y'all are beating the drum like, fire Bruce Arians, fire Jason Light, fire every single one of them. But the you look at what's currently happening, right? And that's what you break down. And it might change week to week. And look what happened to this team. They got after the bye, they got hot. Not in the first half against Atlanta. So let's not forget that, because everyone was fucking jumping off the bridge when they got down against Atlanta. And they're like, oh my God, like this is literally, the wheels are fucking coming off, guys. So, and look how it shifted, and they didn't lose a game since.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, I agree, and we'll get into it. But the first quarter, so obviously quarters of the season are 4 games. So there's 4 quarters of a regular season, and then we have 4 extra games to talk about, which we've never had to do. So it'll be fun.
So let's take a look at that first 4 quarters. The Bucs started 3-1. Their first 3-1 start in 15, 18 years, something like that. I mean, it's been an incredibly long time since this team had the start. Week 1, it started with a loss to the Saints, and obviously those division games hurt. we came into that game with I think a little bit higher expectations than what they put on the field, and it's okay because, you know, what everybody brought up was no OTAs, no preseason, no training camp, all of that good stuff. And I guess that's a valid excuse. Brady was still finding chemistry with his guys, but to kind of also support the narrative and the expectations that people had about the season, the Bucs went on to win 3 in a row. And I mean, they won those games pretty handily, except for maybe that Chargers game was week 4.
They had to come back.
Yeah, the Chargers, which, by the way, that comeback speaks for itself. But
yeah, what were they down 24-7, right?
Yeah, I mean, to Justin Herbert, who, by the way, you know, Rookie of the Year, good season for him. But this team went out there and beat the teams that they needed to beat, and they did it in convincing fashion for 2 weeks in a row. And then, of course, you know, they played their asses off in the second half against the Chargers and ultimately came out winning that one, which was important as well. So it proved that, one, we usually can't count this team out, which we saw later on in the season against Atlanta. But at 3-1, I think a lot of people were feeling pretty good with you know, tempered expectations, I guess, is how they came into the season.
I think, yeah, I mean, obviously people were very upset after the first game, and I think it's maybe just because it's the Saints, right? And everyone, if you're a Bucs fan and you don't hate the Saints, what the hell are you? I mean, come on, everyone hates the Saints. I can't stand Cam Jordan. I think he's a piece of shit personally, but
no, dude, I'm telling you, the guy looks like a supervillain. You've seen that picture of him with his stupid ass mustache, right?
I hate him.
He looks like he ties
damsels
to railroad tracks in his free time. Like
I don't like saying I hate players, but man, watch the guy swing on guys. Like, come on, you're dirty.
He's just dirty. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I don't. Jensen got right in his face after that punch too that he wasn't ejected for.
All right, so don't tell me that he was just going for the ball. Give me a break.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, you start slow, but if you look at it, I think the crazy thing about the Saints game, it was an uncharacteristic. Said that while I'm drinking a beer. Game from Tom Brady because of the turnovers.
Yeah.
So they were down 24-7 in that game and put up 10 straight points to get back in and cut it to 7, right? Yeah. It seemed very much like a Jameis Winston Bucs football team, right? But then, I mean, then you look at it. So you take care of business. You take out Carolina. It was at Denver, right? Was the game 3?
Yeah, at Denver, yep.
And then you come out and you're like, oh my God, what's going to happen against the Chargers? But the difference for me in this team was I have confidence that they can come back. Right? They're at home. This defense is going to step up and be pretty solid, clean it up a little bit. And Tom Brady's been here before.
Yep.
You know, and unfortunately, I think that's the game we lost OJ Howard.
Yep.
So, but yeah, 3-1. I mean, how could you be upset as a Bucs fan that, you know?
Yeah. So actually, so in those 4 games, Tom Brady had actually thrown his only 2 pick sixes of the season, and we were like, "Is this going to be like a normal thing? Like, is this like just? I guess is this just Bruce Arians' offense that you just throw pick sixes? I mean, yeah, like you said, that first game was a very like Jameis Winston vibe, especially after that pick six into Janoris Jenkins. It just, and then you know right after that they went down and scored right away, so they got back into it. Like it was a very, very Jameis Winston vibe game, but I mean, you're playing a team in New Orleans that's been together for years, and that's the advantage they're going to have. So, yeah, it was good. You know, like you said, just you're better than Carolina. You beat Carolina. You're better than Denver. I mean, they physically manhandled Denver. I mean, out of the 4 games, this was the one that just wasn't very close, like from the start.
Yeah, McCaffrey got hurt in that Panthers
Carolina game. McCaffrey got hurt.
Mike Davis came in, I thought.
Yep. Yeah, McCaffrey got hurt, and then Denver they played Jeff Driscoll, and then Denver didn't have like a bunch of guys. Von Miller obviously was out for the year. I don't think Bradley Chubb played, or if he played, it was like very limited.
Was the Chargers game Herbert's first start?
No,
because he came in.
Start, it was Kansas City because that was when Tyrod got his lung.
That's
punctured.
right.
Oh yeah, you're right. Okay.
So. Yeah, then obviously, they manhandled Denver, just completely overwhelmed their offensive line. And then, that Chargers one was very satisfying because, you know, that was like the first time. Like it seemed like whenever in years past when they would go down a lot, they would be able to come back, but they were never able to finish the job.
Yeah, never enough.
I know the Colts game is a game that sticks out to me, but that was, I mean, you separate that from every other game.
Yeah, that was like the one comeback.
Right. Yeah. You know, you look at however many they had up until that point, it wasn't very many.
Look at like 2018 Cincinnati. right? When Fitzpatrick came in and almost led them to the comeback, right? They tied it up and then they ended up losing.
Yeah.
The Giants that year in New York.
The Falcons game that came down to the last play.
Yeah. I mean, they came back in that one. So, in years past, they haven't been able to complete those. And now this year, you could just tell this team was different. So now, I mean, they're 3-1, 2-0 at Raymond James Stadium. And then we get into the second quarter of the season where they have a game against Chicago.
This game pissed me off. This game pissed me off.
This was the most. This might have been the most frustrating one.
This is funny because this next 4-game stretch, you got Chicago, which you just mentioned. We'll talk about. After that, you've got Green Bay, Las Vegas, and the Giants. The Bucs also went 3-1 on that stretch.
Yeah,
they beat the hell out of Green Bay and Vegas. Based off of the box score.
New York.
But it was a different kind of 3-1 because we'll talk about the Chicago game now, but the same questions kind of came back around during the Giants game because this is a Giants team that shouldn't have been, competing as much as they were. The Bucs ultimately
shouldn't
won.
Have beaten them last year.
The Bucs ultimately won an ugly game, but I think a lot of people's expectations were going back into, questioning the staff and kind of the long term of where they see this team once the postseason comes around. Because I remember the Giants game. If we lost that game, everybody's like, well, damn, you're still in an okay spot, but
you got the Rams, the Chiefs, and the Saints upcoming.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
It doesn't look good. So it was a critical win for them. But let's talk about that Chicago game because holy hell, God. That there were. This is the I hate to say the most pivotal game of the season, but when it comes to how people responded and asked questions about this team, this was definitely one of the more pivotal games of the season.
I think this was a big game as far as the turning point for the discipline, right? Yeah. I think I seriously think that Brady screaming at those guys.
Those Jensen flags were bullshit. At least one of them was complete fucking bullshit.
Yeah, a lot of it on that. Are you talking about that one drive where it was just
it started? Lost momentum, kept going backwards.
And actually the Bucs had the lead late in that game.
You remember the Shaq Barrett roughing the passer? That doesn't go away.
Oh my God, that
bullshit.
was
on third and 19.
Yeah, it was something.
That right?
It was. I think it was a little bit shorter than that, but it was definitely third and long.
It was long enough that they shouldn't have converted the goddamn thing.
It was definitely. I think it was 3rd and 14, 3rd and 15, something like that. But yeah,
right. Go to Twitter and tell me who's right. I say 3rd and 19. Evan says 3rd and 14.
3rd and 14.
Right. We'll do a competition.
All right.
People usually steer away from my competitions. I throw at them, but that's a different story.
Like I said, this is just the frustrating one because you knew this Bucs team was probably better than this Bears team, and the Bucs also they jumped out to what was it 13-0 or was it 10-0?
13-0.
Yeah, 13-0 lead, and you lose 20-19. I mean, man, oh man, the Keyshawn Vaughn fumble really changed the whole game.
Oh man,
and, when he got rocked like that, and that was unfortunate. And then the Bears scored 2 touchdowns in this a minute 30 to take the lead 14-13 and a half. And then of course there was some situations late in the game where do you go for on 4th down? Do you kick the field goal? The Bucs ended up kicking a field goal. I said they should have gone for it. So I thought that was a bad move by the staff.
That was asinine. I'm telling you. So that game really set me off at that point because I don't know. If you have an analytics guy, whatever it is, you're down 2 points. You have 1 yard to go. You're on the 7-yard line. It's 4th and 1.
Yeah.
And this is what started kind of. I'm not a fan who says, "Oh, I love all your catchphrases and talk and all that." You're a cool guy. I want to go drink a beer with you. I want you to win fucking football games, y'all.
Are you saying you didn't buy the Bucko Bruce t-shirts when they first started coming out?
Look. Win games, man. But I'm saying no risk it, no biscuit, and all this stuff. It doesn't get me excited.
Yeah,
you're not no risk it, no biscuit because you have a vertical offense. Hello, it's freaking 2021. It's the NFL.
Everybody's got a vertical offense.
Everyone throws the ball, right? It comes down to your game management, the decisions that you make. And at that time, it really pissed me off. And what came to bite the Raiders when we played them was John Gruden did the same thing. He didn't go for it.
Yeah.
And I think we rattled off 21 points in the 4th quarter.
Yeah.
So there's a key moment in the game and you're down 2 points and you're no risk it, no biscuit, and it's 4th and 1. and I think it was a short 4th and 1 too, if I remember correctly.
It wasn't very long.
I mean, I get it if you convert the field goal, it puts you up 1 point, but then you're all the Bears need is 1 field goal. They're at home, and then they win the game. So I didn't understand the logic. That game really pissed me off. And then the other one, I mean, huge, obviously the Packers game.
Well, and the Chicago game was also when they lost Vita Vea, so that was obviously a huge turning point.
Yeah, that was
late in the game. That was late in the game too. There was like 3 minutes left in the fourth, I think. Was that a Monday Night Football game? Thursday.
Oh, Thursday.
Oh,
that was just a bad vibe. That was a bad vibe. As a fan, that was really a bad vibe coming off that game, especially because of that injury.
One more thing I want to tag along to what you had said. You brought up, Bruce Arians, and a lot of people at this time, including us here on the show, questioned his decision making. And this wasn't.
That was the first time I went off on him. I remember.
But this wasn't a new topic. You know what I mean? This wasn't something that just came around this year. It wasn't growing pains of working with Tom Brady and a new offense that he has to get used to. It was something that we had talked about throughout the 2019 year. It is something that lost them that game against the Giants that nobody wants to forget because he just decided to back up Mac A 5 yards for God knows what the hell reason. And so a lot of people who, like you have said, Chris, look at this game critically and look at this team when you're balancing wins and losses. That's a move that potentially loses you a football game. And I mean, now that we're looking at it, hindsight's 2020, it's ultimately probably what played a big helping hand in the Bucs losing that football game.
And I don't think you can, if we talk about just single out a coach, you can't judge a coach based off of what he did somewhere else, right? As fans, I don't give a shit what he did in Indianapolis. We're just talking specifically about Bruce. We're talking Coach Arians. I'll show respect. Dude's a Super Bowl champ. But I'm not trying to be
soon.
I'm not trying to be your friend off the football field. I'm not trying to be buddies with your kid. I don't care if I'm a content creator. I want to be objective. And you could point to specific situations the year before. You nailed the Giants game. And I think with the decision, and then I think what was frustrating as a fan that season, regardless of the turnovers, that's enough. But was the backpedaling. So you hear something in the post game, but then the next day it's like, well, no, I didn't mean that. So, well, what's real? So it was very frustrating to see some of the decisions, what you challenge, what you don't challenge, right? That previous year.
Yeah.
So that led up to then this decision, and it obviously didn't cost the team the season. They're Super Bowl champs, man. But it was just another one that was like, man, what?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
And go ahead.
Just as a disclaimer, I wanted to kind of tag on to the end. That's the spirit of the season review show. Like, I think a lot of people are jumping in and they're listening to us talk shit about Coach.
They're like,
Bruce
"Oh my God!" Like, what is
right? Listen,
we're
going to talk about the peaks and the valleys all throughout this season, and we're going to wrap it up on a good note. I promise.
Oh, of course. Oh, they won the Super Bowl, right?
They did. They won. Okay. They won the last game of the year, I believe.
Just check it.
They dominated that Super Bowl, by the way.
Bring it all full circle before we move on to our next quarter. In the first quarter, we're like, wow, we got a team now that regardless of how many points they get down, we're not going to be disappointed because they could pull it off, right? We didn't have that. We were like, man, they'll get so close. They're going to disappoint us. Right. They'll miss a field goal. They'll throw an interception or Then in the second quarter, it's like, well, what is this team's true identity? Are they a team that is going to come back and get down and win football games? Because then we saw them get up in games, and then they let teams crawl back. And not so much the defense, because the offense just started becoming very inconsistent, in my opinion. Stalled drives.
Stalling out. The slow start is the persona that this team carried for quite a few weeks on the offense, is that they couldn't score any damn points in the first quarter of games.
And this is where you get into the critique of what's their play call on first down? Why aren't we seeing more play action? So, in that quarter, I think that's where we saw the reactions from fans and from folks who cover the team of what team do we actually have here? Because now you're going into your toughest stretch and your toughest quarter. And a win's a win. I don't care. They beat the Giants. They didn't look good doing it. They didn't look good doing it. But then it's like, oh, man, if that's what they're going to do, now imagine they got the Rams defense coming up. They got the Saints defense coming up. Like, offense struggled against the Giants. Now we got to see what plays out here for the next quarter.
So just to recap it really fast. Lose to the Bears, kick the crap out of the Packers. After being down 10-0, by the way. So,
an undefeated team at the time who ultimately had the MVP under center.
Aaron Rodgers, played
almost
completely
play the season? Jamel Dean, potentially, right?
That might have been. If that doesn't happen, the Packers go up 17-0. That game's over.
Yeah.
That definitely could have been. And then the Raiders game, that
Gruden
felt like
screwed up.
Yeah, and I mean, it did feel like the Raiders' defense just couldn't hang with the Bucs' offense a lot. So that was a good game for the Bucs' offense.
And they got rid of their defense coordinator.
That-
Probably not
It,
that
I
long
think it was.
after
I think
that.
it was a
Couple weeks, maybe?
2 or 3 weeks. I think.
And that Raiders game
probably
also,
posted,
let me just throw this in there. That Raiders game has my play of the year. I don't know if you guys have a play of the year picked out.
Which
but
one?
We
Scotty
saw
Miller?
that Tom Brady to Scotty Miller connection, that beautiful bomb to the corner of the end zone. That was that first throw that I had seen from Brady where I looked at my TV, watched the replay,
Just
and
a
said,
rainbow.
holy shit, he still got it.
Yeah.
Because let's be honest, I mean, we talk about expectations for this team, expectations for Tom Brady coming into a new system, a 43-year-old quarterback. I mean,
Wait, but Rhett, all he does is dink and dunk. So I don't know what
yeah,
you're talking
right. The
about.
guy doesn't have an
He's
arm
going to get
anymore.
killed behind this offensive line. Come on, guys.
Yeah, this
Yeah,
offensive
he's not gonna
got
tell
line.
him.
this many times. Just imagine.
That was the play that just you know what I mean? Like it was that first throw from Tom in Tampa that I had just been, holy hell. That play got me excited. That one
So
sticks
then-
out to me.
They end up narrowly beating the Giants because of a controversial non-call on the 2-point conversion. I thought
That's
it was-
right. I forgot about that.
I'm gonna be biased, but I thought it was fine. They barely escaped that. So then, I mean, at this point, like the Chicago loss was frustrating, but they're 6-2 going into this Sunday night game against the Saints. Like, what more could you ask for, right? Like, this is the situation you want. Right?
Yeah.
I think the Saints were either 6-2 or they had a very similar record at that point. And of course, this is the one game I went to because why
man.
not?
You took 2 L's that week. You lost the King of the Wing competition, and you had to sit through 4 quarters of the
That was
Bucs just
brutal.
getting paddled.
I watched
it was
that.
it was a rough week.
Did you
I
like the
No.
ASMR, the terrible audio that we
Can
had?
I give you all some feedback? It's not attractive to watch, and if you're into it, you're into it. It's not attractive to watch 2 dudes eat wings and like inhale them.
Yeah.
Guys, I was like, look,
Yeah.
I got through 5 minutes and I was like, oh man.
Dude,
I
I'm
gotta
telling
turn
you,
this
it
up.
would have.
Definitely
I
not for
feel like it
everybody.
ultimately would have been pulled off a lot better if maybe we had like a commentator. You know what I mean? A third person
Yeah,
who would
yeah,
want to talk.
yeah.
Because I also didn't realize that the microphone was close enough to our mouth to where it was just constant inhaling. I mean, if you close
Awful.
your eyes, it'll make your mother blush. That's how bad it is.
Yeah.
But let's
Getting
talk
sick
about
thinking about it.
let's talk about this next quarter of the season. The team is 6-2 headed into this game with New Orleans, and we kind of said that this Week 9 game is going to decide who wins the NFC South. It ultimately did in very decisive fashion, but this is also a very important quarter of games because it stretched that narrative and it begged people to ask the question, what can this team accomplish? Because, we kind of learned over the first few weeks that they're going to beat the teams they're supposed to beat. All right, so they lost to New Orleans 38-3, which nobody saw coming, but it's the outlier on the season. Whatever. You move past it, you bounce back, you put up almost 50 points on Carolina, you beat a team that you should beat to go to 7-3, and then you've got LA and Kansas City. And like I said, the question at this point, how does this team perform against good teams, right? They're going to beat the teams that they are supposed to beat, and they've done that up until this point, except for maybe Chicago. But how are they going to handle some of the best teams in the NFL? Well, they lost all those games. They lost to the Rams, they lost to KC, and here they are at 7-5. It's interesting because at this point, people have been begging for the Bucs to be 7-5 at this point in the season, but how this team got there to go from 6-2 to 7-5, 1-3 over these 4 games, it's a damn critical stretch. And I mean, it allowed the bye week to come around at the best possible time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've been punched in the face. Sorry, Evan. Go ahead.
you're
No,
good.
you go first. I'm gonna
All
sip.
right.
I'm gonna sip my beer.
So I think the Rams game might have been the most honestly. I mean, New Orleans has got their butts kicked, right? Like, I mean, it's simple. It really is. There's no way around it. They got outplayed in every single part of the game, and I mean, you could tell once New Orleans was up 14-0. Like, Rhett, you are one of the most optimistic fans that I know. And you texted me, you said the game's over. Like, they were, I believe it was either 14-0 or 21-0. You said this game's done.
Well,
like,
you could just tell. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? I know we've talked about how this team started to show that they can compete in games where they're down like that, but a team like the Saints, especially this regular season, it was just a much different task. And once they were down by 2 scores and you really didn't see this offense wake up at all, that's when I had kind of just thrown in the towel.
Well, they got punched in the face and they didn't respond. But again, if you look at it, they got the matchup in the playoffs, right? That's why I was salivating. Give me the fucking Saints. Like you got punched in the mouth and you didn't get back up, and they celebrated, and that's fine. They're players; they're allowed to do so. I personally think that you look like a fool in some of the gestures that you're making, and the league thought so as well, and find them appropriately. But I guarantee you that this set up, eat your fingers. But this set up Tampa, in my opinion, if I got my ass handed to me, I got punched in the face, and I get up that game. No, if I get a rematch against you, you better watch out. And it's on your turf. I'm gonna put you in the ground, man. Like, and that's what they did to Drew Brees. So I think that game was pivotal.
It helped
because of the fact that how can you not be? It's the playoffs already, guys. I know we're jumping ahead, but it's the playoffs, and this team just beats your ass, and you're 0-2 against them. You think Tom Brady doesn't lose 2 games in a row to the same team? You think he's gonna lose 3? No. If you didn't come into that game and think like Bucs are going to do this and it's going to happen and they're going to retire Drew Brees. So I do think that game was pivotal for the season overall. And you look at games like, the Kansas City game was close. The Rams game was close, but the narrative changed a little bit with fans and with you all as content creators, folks that cover the team this is a good football team, but can they beat the teams that are looked at as good to great football teams, right?
Just
and they
better.
hadn't done it. They hadn't done it yet outside of the Packers, right? But it's a week to week league, I mean, shit. Who was it? Atlanta almost knocked off Kansas City. You look at and there's upsets. The Jets beat the Rams, or I know the Dolphins.
The Jets beat the Rams. The Panthers almost knocked off Kansas City.
So you've got week to week, right? So, but I think fans just expected win one of these games against 3 of who was predicted to be in the playoffs between the Chiefs, the Saints. I think the Chiefs and the Saints were probably picked. If you look at percentages, probably were picked as the Super Bowl matchup.
Oh yeah.
So I think it was pivotal what happened in that game and the matchup that then happened in the playoffs. But this is a very disappointing time. And it was, now let's see how they respond. And they're 7-5. So then what do they have?
Yeah, I think if the Bucs win that game versus New Orleans in a regular season, they still may win in the playoffs, but like you said, it's just a different vibe. And I had actually, I picked Green Bay to beat the Bucs in the AFC title game, but the week before I picked the Bucs to win because I said Tom Brady's not losing 3 times in a row.
Not 3 times. No way in hell.
It's not happening. So
no way.
And yes, like Brady, he didn't play his best ball, but you know what? He got the job done, and that defense, like you said, absolutely buried Drew Brees. So the Rams game, I want to talk about this for a second. So obviously the Chiefs game, we'll be able to talk about the Chiefs later. So I want to focus on the Rams for a second. To me, this was the more frustrating of the 2 losses at home there by identical scores, because I think the Bucs had the more opportunities to actually take control of this game. And it's just where the coaching staff really failed them, because that was like the one game I think where like the vertical style and just, the deep shot or no shot was really evident. And that's, the Rams defense takes that away, and the Bucs had success underneath that whole game, and they just kept going away from it. I think that was one of Brady's worst games, if not his worst game of the year. The defense had a rough first half, but then you know what, man, they got 2 turnovers in the second half. Jason Pierre-Paul and Jordan Whitehead with interceptions, and then the Bucs offense just couldn't hold up their end of the bargain. So I think that was the more frustrating of the 2, and then Kansas City, get down 17-0, whatever. But yeah, I mean, you guys are right. 7-5. You're looking at these next 4 games, and the Vikings were in the playoff hunt still at the time. So they're the next opponent. And if you lose to them, they jump you. They jump you in the playoff race. So that's a pivotal game coming up. But there's an important bye week, which I think a lot of people, when the schedule first came out, everybody, man, that bye week's late, right? I think it's the Panthers and the Bucs obviously had the same bye week because the NFL this year did the week 2 matchups would have the bye week. So it's the latest the bye week's ever gone in the NFL history. So week 13, I think, looking back on it, it couldn't come at a better time.
Oh yeah, no way.
To wrap up the Rams game, and I think you made a couple very good points, Evan. there's some key things I think that were frustrating from the game. But the game was tied, I think, with 4 minutes left.
24.
Bucs were driving with a chance to win it, and I remember that was the only game I got to go to in person this year, and the last thing I expected was for Tom Brady to overthrow his receiver and throw a pick on the last drive of the game.
Throwing the Cameron Brate, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think the most frustrating thing coming out of that game was Leonard Fournette looked awful.
Dreadful.
That game. I think that was the game where the receivers, because I know this was the game where the receivers dropped balls.
I think it might have been where the running backs didn't have a catch.
I'm sorry, running backs.
And they had, they didn't have a catch and they had like 6 or 7 drops or something.
Yeah.
And that's the one where it's like, well, why you drafted Keyshawn Vaughn? Like, he can't catch the ball? I mean, so the running back, the rushing game was extremely porous that game. And that's where you had, they made Jared Goff look like as MVP. 12 catches for Robert Woods. Cooper Kupp had 11. Both had over 130 yards receiving.
First time in Rams history that both wide receivers went over double-digit receptions in a game.
So I agree. I mean, that was a very frustrating game, and I think it's because those specific components that was, defense looked suspect at times, and then offense was frustrating. We saw two interceptions by TB as well, which is uncharacteristic, and the running games struggled. So that was the turning point as far as I think fans objectively to say, oh shit, are the wheels about to come off?
Yeah.
Are they not as good? Right?
Enter Kansas City, right? I mean, you wanted a big win coming into the matchup, which ended up being a Super Bowl matchup, but we won the one that counted.
Right? Yeah.
Well, I think what jarred people the most when you look at the Kansas City game and how that went was, Tyreek Hill getting, 3 games worth of receiving yards in what felt like 6 minutes. I don't think anybody expected that. We knew that Kansas City was coming in with a very high-powered offense and it would be a test for the secondary, but I think everybody came to the assumption that if Kansas City really wanted to, they could have put up 600, 700 total yards on the Bucs, just keep chucking it deep to Tyreek Hill. That's all they had to do after a certain point.
I tweeted out at some point, I think I was like, this is the New Orleans game, and then I was like, oh no, this is worse. And then, because if you remember, Shaq Barrett got a strip sack, but the Chiefs were up 17-0 in the red zone. It was I believe it was first and goal or second and goal. They're about to go up 24-0. And then Shaq Barrett got that huge strip sack. So that really changed the game. But yeah, this one was just you dug yourself too deep of a hole.
The Bucs. Bucs outscored them 17-7 in the second half. Which, knowing if this was, and I think Tony Romo called it. Y'all asked like who called Kansas City and Tampa in the Super Bowl.
He did right at the end of that
game. They said, I think Romo said this is your Super Bowl matchup.
Jim Nantz only reminded us 18
he said
and a half
something.
times.
Romo would never do that. At least he's not Troy Aikman. He's the better of the Cowboys quarterbacks.
Definitely.
And I'm not a Dallas fan, but it's the truth.
So, I think he said something along the lines of like, it wouldn't surprise me if we see both these teams back here in this same situation. So
he wouldn't have said that if the Bucs didn't show up in the second half and outscore them 17-7. And I think that's if you look at a prelude to the Super Bowl, this is what should have given Bucs fans hope that the
in the second half they
all world Patrick Mahomes and their offense could be slowed down once Todd Bowles gets his team doing what they need to do.
It was the one of, a handful of times that Kansas City and Patrick Mahomes in particular looked a little bit vulnerable was the second half of that game. And, the Buccaneers ultimately did make it a close game that they could have won. They didn't get the job done. But here we are at 7-5. It is the bye week. Could not come at a better time. We talk about expectations for this team. A lot of people see them running the table. They're going to beat Minnesota, Atlanta, Detroit, beat Atlanta again. And that's exactly what they did. But at the same time, you look at these games, and I remember the toughest games that we talked about is either going to be the Minnesota game or or maybe that first Atlanta game.
One of the Falcons.
One of the Atlanta games.
Yeah, because it's hard to sweep a division opponent. Doesn't matter how good of a team you are. So, possibility of going 3-1, finishing 10-6. 10-6 with this team, man, it just felt incredibly underwhelming. And I know that this was a season where expectations were raised and lowered and questions were being asked. But regardless, 10-6 did feel a little bit underwhelming if they went that route, right? Like, am I right? You lose to one of those 3 teams that you're playing, and it's just not a great look.
Right.
I wanted double digits. I mean, again, I'm used to a team that's 6-10, 7-9. So getting a double digits, I think, would have been a huge step because, we talked about early on, expectations going into the season. I didn't expect them to win the Super Bowl. So double digit wins, getting into the playoffs, I thought was going to be just fine. And I think we saw the fear in the first half of the Atlanta game. But apparently in the bye week, they figured out that play action works with this team that we have. And they figured out that pre-snap motion sometimes is good too. And you don't have to run the ball every single time on first down. So whatever worked, right? I don't know if the staff has said, like, fuck it, we're gonna let TB do what TB does, right? And let him loose, man. I mean,
yeah,
I'm convinced that's what happened.
Greatest quarterback to ever play the game, man. Like, I'd be like, hey, Tom,
what do you want to do?
I'm thinking of calling this. What do you want to do?
Yeah.
Oh, you want Cam Brate on this plate?
Cool. I'm
we're
110% convinced that's exactly how it happened. I think during the bye week, they sat down, had a conversation, talked to Tom, said, hey, how can we make you more comfortable? I mean, Bruce kind of let the cat out of the bag during the playoffs and said, Tom's the type of guy where sometimes you just sit back and watch. But if you really look at the situation of this team, you look at Bruce Arians and where he is at in his career, the faith that he has in his staff, and obviously the faith that he has in TB12, I have no doubt in my mind that that's ultimately, where this offense was coming into the playoffs, because they really did start to embrace that short passing game, and it opened up a whole new world for them.
Yeah, so this was they have a big game versus the Vikings, and they come out, and it's kind of a pedestrian day on offense, but I think they took advantage of their opportunities, and the Bucs defense, this is when you're really starting to see the Bucs defense clamp down in second halves and fourth quarters of games, because that game was close the entire way. Like, the Bucs had some separation late in the third quarter, but then Minnesota started to climb back.
Kirk Cousins was Mr. Fourth Quarter at the time.
Right. And then, Bucs fans were getting, shades, the you like that thing. And, I know Fisher was covering that one because I remember listening to the podcast afterwards. So, I do.
The Washington game from years ago. Yeah, man.
You like that?
Oh wow, one of the most brutal games I've ever covered in the short time that I covered the team. Wow, that was. That's when Peter Report came out and Scott said, it's time to move on from. Lovie Smith. That was the turning point.
That was the one. He said, I think, I forget what he said, like collapse of the Capitol or something.
35-7?
No, it was 24-0, I think, or something.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, something like that. It was like 24-0 at halftime or something like that. I don't remember really.
Oh man.
No, I mean you're 100%. The defense and the offense, 9 points in the second half against Minnesota. But the defense shut out Minnesota in the fourth quarter. The three games going into, Atlanta, not a good football team. Detroit, I think, was at that time the worst football team in the NFL.
Bad.
And beating Atlanta again. But here's the deal: the team doesn't make the schedule. The coaches don't make the schedule, and the players don't make the schedule. So go out and do your business. And it's important in the NFL to go on a roll towards the end of the year.
Yeah.
Because if you would have backed this up to the Rams game, and I would have asked both of you and most fans, if they're thinking objectively, and said, who's your team that you were looking at right now that looks good from the NFC that's going to represent the NFC in the Super Bowl? And I bet 75% of people would have said, well, the Rams. I mean, Jared Goff just clicked against Tampa. The defense did really well. They picked off Tom Brady twice. And then look how quickly that shifts, right? Then they started, they went just downhill.
I think it was early December. I had tweeted I thought it was going to be the Rams and the Chiefs in the Super Bowl.
Right. And, Seattle was playing good at the time. So, again, this is a week-to-week league. But when you get hot, and you get hot as you get towards the end of the season, you get that confidence as a football team, and they started clicking. They had, obviously the COVID situation towards the end of the year with Devin White, and you got to look at, I don't want to fast forward to the playoffs, but we're almost there, guys. So the matchups worked out, I think, in the Bucs' favor, but they had to get through some key components missing for that first matchup against Washington, which ended up being probably their toughest game.
Yeah. So they beat. Sorry, Rhett.
You're good.
They beat Minnesota. Now they beat Atlanta, but I want to fast forward here to halftime in Atlanta. We've mentioned it here. Now we're finally able to talk about it. This is the game we're on. Not good. And the Falcons, the Falcons defense is horrible, and the Bucs offense looked awful. They looked out of sync. The defense was really on the field. It felt like the entire first half. I remember I was actually watching the game with my cousin, who's not even a Bucs fan, but he was in and out of the room and stuff. And he goes, "Man, every time I look, I think Atlanta has the ball. Like, every single time I look, they have the ball." And the Bucs offense, it was just, if I don't know, if Atlanta was a better football team, that game would be done too. I mean, it was just, it was bad. And I think the second half of that game, the two turning points that people look at, it's either one, the bye week, or two, the second half of the Atlanta game.
That's what I called. That's what I called. It completely started the momentum, and it proved again that regardless of the score, this is a different Bucs team. This is not the team that you watched last year, the year before that, where they get down and they're gonna do it. Oh damn! Interception,
this time.
Fumble, missed field goal, penalty. This, to me, was the turning point of the year, coming out after half. Regardless of the team, we've said it. Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if the team won 5 games or if they won 11. It's NFL. It's week to week.
Right.
Huge, because then they went on a tear.
Yeah, and the defense yet again in the second half, clamping down on Atlanta. And then the next one, Detroit, we don't have to spend too much time. That's when they clinched the playoff game. They completely just manhandled that team. So
it was the most boring game I've ever watched this year.
that was actually
a career day for Tom Brady in 2 quarters. He didn't even have to play the second half. We got Blaine Gabbert connecting with Robert Gronkowski for a touchdown. Yeah. So that's the thing about this offense, and I want to circle back around to this part of the conversation. Was the questions headed into the bye week is what are they going to do about this offense? I remember saying here on the show that I think Antonio Brown has inadvertently ruined this offense because it seemed like the timing...
A lot of people thought that.
It seemed like the timing had worked out perfectly, that they had just forgotten how to play football by the time AB got into town, and this last 4-game stretch proved all of us wrong. But, yeah, they were taking teams to the woodshed. I mean, they beat Detroit by 40 points in just the first half. You know what I mean? It would have been maybe a little bit less of a deficit if you don't throw... You know what I'm trying to say. It would have been a bigger deficit if you let Tom Brady play all 4 quarters, but they were a playoff team at this point, and they weren't going to do that. You finish off strong against Atlanta, you sweep a division opponent, and you finish the season 11-5. This offense, and I guess this team, was really playing the best football that they had played all year headed into the playoffs, and that's exactly what you want.
Yeah, Rhett, let me. You just said something about AB, right?
Yeah.
You can not like a player, right? I mean, and you can have that opinion.
Personally,
and say
it's personal stuff.
I think this player's a piece of shit. I mean, personally, I can't root for them in their individual. If they help the team, great. If the players like them, that's fine. You have every right as a fan to say, I personally don't like this guy. And maybe just based off of what happened, I'm going to have the opinion that it didn't help the team. And that's fine. And then 6 weeks later, someone's like, well, they won the Super Bowl. Go fuck yourself. Okay, well, I mean, it doesn't change my opinion.
Well, I
hated Kellen Winslow. To me, one of the worst moves ever as a fan was that trade. I think they had to trade for him. I couldn't stand him. I thought and look, he ended up look at the character he ended up being. Yeah. Right. And that's not me saying I told you so. Just like, man, I love that if the team's going to win football games, they won 10. I think that year they had him with Josh Freeman. I don't have to root for him individually, man. I don't have to like you as a person. I didn't like many Bucs players back in the day. So you can do your background on these guys, and there are certain players that I think as fans you gravitate to, right? I gravitated to Adam Humphries or Joe Jurevicius or Mike Allstott and Ryan Jensen and Pat Murray and all these players throughout the year. Work done, they're just huge. And but you have every right to have that opinion, Rhett. I mean,
well, it wasn't even so much as, a personal standpoint. Like everything, we even started, I think it was our live stream or like the day after podcast that they had signed him, where we opened it up and said, preface, AB is a piece of shit off of the field. But it wasn't even so much from, a personal standpoint. It was from a football standpoint, because it's like, well, maybe there's an urgency maybe there's an urgency to try and squeeze this guy in, and it's a little unnecessary, and it's messing everybody's rhythm up. And that's kind of the direction I was coming from. So, I mean, while he is, who he is off of the field, He did help us win a Super Bowl and ultimately ended up being a good move football-wise.
And if it didn't work out, then Jason Light would be taking a huge critique right now versus being celebrated as the best executive in the NFL.
As the guy who took a chance on the guy that nobody else wanted to.
Right.
Yeah.
So you never know. I mean, if it worked out like it did, great. He's the best. If it wouldn't have worked out, people would have pointed to that. They would have pointed to Leonard Fournette. They would have pointed to the AB signing and say, did it throw off the chemistry of the football team? Why can't you get guys like Scotty Miller and Tyler Johnson and Ronald Jones and Keyshawn Vaughn? Storyline would have completely changed. It's just sports, guys. This is what happens. You never know.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's definitely interesting because obviously Antonio Brown's first game was that game versus New Orleans, right? And nobody had a good day, right? So, but I think many fans were just frustrated with that because they signed him. I want to say it was either right after the Green Bay game or it was right. Yeah. It was shortly after the Green Bay game
because we had to wait 2 weeks.
It was Sunday. The Green Bay game was on Sunday. They signed him that Friday, and then they played Vegas that Sunday. And Scotty Miller and Tyler Johnson both had touchdowns in Vegas. So they were like, why? What is the point? But as it turns out, I mean, the final 3 weeks of the year, AB has his first touchdown as a Buck in week 15. Week 16, he has a touchdown. And week 17, he has 2 touchdowns. So yeah, you can not like him personally. You don't have to root for him, right? Root for the team, not the player, right? You're a Bucs fan. You don't have to be an Antonio Brown fan. I completely understand it, But to say that he didn't help this team when he really did. And I'm not saying that you're saying that, but clearly those fans that didn't really understand it, I think from a football perspective, I think, now looking back on it, they see what the vision was. And like you said, there was a possibility it didn't work out, right? There's a possibility that when he wasn't getting his touches, he blows up and does his crazy thing. And, he doesn't like his cleats or his helmet or whatever it is. And then he's cut and it's a complete distraction to the team and they don't win a Super Bowl. I'll tell you that right now. That's it's a major distraction. So, it's a big thing, but the signing of Antonio Brown, it's high risk, high reward, I think, because he's a talented player.
You could say it was his last chance, but you could look at other players. Other teams in the league, how many times have players been given the last chance and they fuck it up?
Yeah.
I mean, Josh Gordon again this year, maybe.
I don't know. Josh Gordon, that's a sad case. I don't understand that, but I mean, it was his last chance. I mean, if he was cut by Tampa Bay, he's going nowhere else. Like that was it. And I think Seattle and Baltimore were the other 2 teams interested in signing him when his suspension was going to be lifted. So. And now, obviously he had an offseason where he's a free agent. So we'll see what happens. But it's definitely he had a good end of the season and a postseason run, which we'll get into right now.
So here we are. The Buccaneers are 11-5 to finish the regular season, best season they have had in years. And they are slated as the 5 seed, which was also an important storyline over these last 4 games. You finished 10-6. Likely you're the 6 seed. Likely you're playing a team like Green Bay or even New Orleans, who still had a shot at the 1 seed at the time. They ended up getting the 5 seed. They played a team from the NFC East in Washington. Before we get into this playoff run,
huge.
Yeah, that was huge consequence, or very important consequences for the playoffs here. But before we get into the playoff run, I do want to give a brief moment to talk about our newest sponsor, eBay. If we got any sneakerheads in our audience, which I'm sure we do, eBay is the original sneaker marketplace. It's the place to go to cop the pair you've been eyeing for a little while. Whether it's some rare stock or the latest release, find the exact shoe that you're looking for. With eBay's authenticity guarantee, your sneakers are meticulously inspected by independent professional authenticators. A team of experienced sneaker authenticators verify the box, the logo, stitching, dozens of other inspection points to make sure you're not getting some fakes because, let's face it, a lot of these online marketplaces, when it comes to shoes, have a reputation of not always having the best measures possible to make sure you're getting real merchandise, the stuff that you're paying top dollar for. Well, eBay kicks ass with that. Also, each sneaker receives an authenticity guarantee tag that includes a digital stamp of authenticity, and it also protects sellers with a verified return process. And if you're a sneaker seller, eBay has eliminated selling fees on sneakers over $100, making it free to sell and flip your collection. So go to ebay.com/sneakers today. eBay, the world's best destination for discovering great value and unique selection. So here we are, the postseason. The Buccaneers get their first playoff berth since all the way back in 2007. And they play Washington. What's funny about this playoff run is it is where the narrative of this team feels like it was flipped on its head. Because I think a lot of people expected them to beat Washington. Nobody expected Taylor Heinicke to have the day that he had and to get himself paid a little bit of money. But coming into this season, when the Bucs are adding all these pieces, I remember the narrative was, well, it's Tom Brady with a stacked roster and they're going to steamroll people. And then we saw the highs and lows of the regular season, and then the narrative came, well, does this team really know how to win? And then a lot of people, including Steve Smith, said that once the playoffs come around, the Bucs are going to get their ass whooped. They're going to get ran. They're going to get routed. And, they square off against a 7-9 Washington team in the wild card round. They win a close game. I think the closest game that they had all postseason. Because, coming into this, you expected Alex Smith. You get the news a couple days before it's going to be Taylor Heinicke. And, it creates an interesting matchup, and the Bucs ultimately come out on top. But what does this win say about this team headed into the divisional round?
Well, it says that they can win without one of their best defensive players. Devin White was not in that game, and obviously that made a huge difference. So props to Taylor Heinicke, played his butt off.
Props to Minner too. Minner didn't play a bad game.
Oh no,
but he's not Devin White.
Yeah, exactly. You could tell he doesn't have that speed, and there was a lot of times where Heinicke was avoiding rushers and able to get rid of, and there was a few times where I'm like, man, Devin White probably makes that play, right? Like he's probably there instead of that being a 7-yard run, it's probably a 2-yard run. Losing him was big, but this offense really looked good against what I think is a very good defense and a very good defensive front. One of the best defenses, I think a top 10 defense in football on the road. And I mean, on a day where Chris Godwin still had, like, stat-wise, he had a good day, but he had a few drops here and there. And I think they played efficient and they played well on offense. And then on defense, it was weird, man, because like that's the game, like throughout these whole playoffs that I felt the most uneasy. Like the Bucs were up 8, and I literally tweeted, I was like, there's no way you can't think this isn't going to overtime.
Backup quarterback, baby.
It's just
that's all it takes.
And I think that narrative's been killed the
Hopefully
past
we can
few
put
years.
that to bed.
That narrative's been killed, I think, officially now. But it was a weird game, but obviously, it just showed their toughness that they can win without one of their better players, and also showed the depth that they have on the team.
Where are games won and lost, fellas?
Trenches,
brother.
Okay, so we faced a team, and I didn't think, no way, no chance in hell Tampa was dropping a game to Washington.
Yeah.
Washington has a very talented and young defensive line. Everyone talks about it. We know that. And our offensive line played very well until Kappa went down. And then there were some struggles. But what I believe was underrated was Washington's offensive line. They got some talent on the offensive line, fellas.
They do.
Yeah.
I think you can put them up there against New Orleans, because that was the next week's matchup. And I could tell you that, I don't know, man, Washington's offensive line potentially is just as good, if not right on the same level. They're a top 10, in my opinion, offensive line. So you face a team that has a solid offensive line, a very young and talented defensive line, a quarterback that you don't have much film on, who's just played ridiculous, got enough to get a win, and you were missing some key components, right? But they won. And they set up the matchup, which, my God, everyone wanted. Everyone wanted it. If you didn't want this matchup, I don't know why you watch football. Don't ever watch again. This was every Bucs fan's dream, to face the team, your rival, the most hated team, in my opinion, that the Bucs ever play, against Drew Brees in potentially his last game if he loses, in their house. Set it up perfectly. Defense came out firing. Turnovers, 4 turnovers in that game.
Yep.
Just one of my favorite games that I've watched this team play in a while.
The defense
the Super Bowl.
was one of the biggest question marks coming into this rematch with New Orleans because, we know that Drew Brees isn't going to be able to do what Heineke was able to do to this defense, but one, you get Devin White back. But they responded incredibly well because they were, the big question mark about this team. Nobody really talked about the offense after the Washington game. It was all about, can this defense slow down a team that is pretty good with the short game, a team that gets the ball out of the pocket quickly? We know Drew Brees is a guy who has always been able to do that. He's not going to peel the top off of this defense, which is what a lot of people knew coming into this game as well. But the defense, without a doubt, was in the hot seat coming into this one, and I don't think anybody expected them to rebound and play the way that they did. I think throughout the playoffs, the Super Bowl not included, this was probably the most complete game they played.
They
Go ahead.
So everything that was working in the Bucs' favor towards the end of the year started working against the Saints towards the end of the year, right? They got hit. They got hit with the COVID too, right?
Yeah.
And I know they had the Sunday matchup, which allowed Kamara to come back and play. They scored on a gimmick play, y'all. I mean, and great that Jameis Winston threw a touchdown against his former team, but it doesn't make it. They blew coverage, right? It was miscommunication in the secondary. They blew coverage. That was, I believe, Carlton Davis's guy. No big deal. Not going to make that mistake again. Slant boy do that game? He didn't do shit, right? They were all over Drew Brees in that game. Statement game. But is it a different story if Taysom Hill and Latavius Murray play? And then who's their guy that was putting it up big in special teams in the first half that went out?
Harris.
And he was probably going to be a key component on offense because they didn't have much else. So, and I'm not making excuses. Bucs handed it to him. But the things that went right for Tampa started to go wrong for New Orleans, and I love it, and I don't give a shit. Beat their ass.
Right. And I mean, this was like the end of everybody knew it. Like everybody knew what was coming for New Orleans this season. This offseason, everybody knew what was coming, right? Like whether they won the Super Bowl or not, you knew the inevitable. You're looking at that cap and it doesn't look good. And you're looking at the ages of the players and, everybody knew. And just to be able to do it in New Orleans, I think makes it even better.
Well, I mean, yeah. And look, the offense didn't play lights out.
But they got the job done.
New Orleans' strength is their defense, especially I think at home, right? They do things in the secondary that if they get called, they get called, and if they don't get called, they take advantage of it.
Yeah, all three levels of their defense, I think, has really good players.
Ryan Jensen showed up this game. Aaron Stinney showed up this game in a matchup where you thought, oh man, Stinney's first start. Well, what's going to happen? They shut Drew Brees. They held Drew Brees to 134 yards, 3 picks. Jared Cook had a fumble, no catches for Michael Thomas. Give it up to the defense, man. They held Kamara to under 100 yards. But on offense, you look at, I think Fournette was the leading receiver in that game. Fournette and Cam Brate. I think it was Brate, but I think Fournette might have been 2. I think Fournette might have been the second. I think Brate. Yeah, Brate and then Fournette.
Yeah, because I don't think Godwin had much of anything. Evans had that 1 touchdown.
Yep,
but then
3
other
yards.
than that,
only
that
catch,
was
I believe.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, so as long as it's a touchdown, who cares? Right?
After all the confidence to beat that team, you knew it was going to happen. But how sweet was it?
Definitely just to do it in a defensive way, right?
Yeah.
Against a guy that's just tortured the Bucs defense for years and years and years, and. Drew Brees has never talked like smack or anything like that. But then, against Michael Thomas, a guy that just talks, against Alvin Kamara, who is a good player, and he doesn't talk as much smack, but still a little cocky. And then, of course, Cam Jordan, Tristan Wirfs, and Donovan Smith completely shutting them guys down. A huge thing for Donovan Smith after, arguably his 2 worst games of the season both came against New Orleans. So, especially that week 1 game that Trey Hendrickson really gave it to him. And then Trey Hendrickson actually didn't play it versus Chicago, and then he came back versus Tampa. So the New Orleans defense was really at full strength, and it was big. Like you said, the offense didn't play lights out, but you know what? They did enough. Tyler Johnson, third and 11, with that catch, incredible. One of the biggest plays, I think, that won't be talked about enough. And then the very next play was Scotty Miller deep down the field, and then I think the Bucs ended up taking the lead there. But then once, I know I've talked to a lot of people. They're like, I wasn't really sure the game was over. As soon as Devin White picked that ball off when it was 23-20, I knew it was done. I knew because I knew they were scoring. I knew Tom Brady was scoring a touchdown. I knew that, he saw the meat right there, and he was going to go in for the kill.
We know matchups. We know matchups. Steelers, Browns. These rivals. Tell me right now, the Bucs Saints aren't one of the most huge rivals right now, based off of things that we've seen over the couple of years. The Cutter Peyton incident. You've got our former quarterback now playing for them and eating fingers after and all that stuff that happened.
And
this is a rivalry.
He ate those fingers with the Bucs before a game versus the Saints, so it all comes back.
Well, then you go back. I mean, the ejection of Mike Evans because
Winston was
and this is a
Taylor
rivalry.
Swift says there's bad blood, but I'm telling you, Sean Payton and Bruce Arians say that's real bad blood.
This is a rivalry that was taken to another level this season just because of the Bucs getting much more exposure. So you got a lot of fresh eyes on what this rivalry is.
And they were much better.
But a lot of people didn't see the Dirk Cutter incident. A lot of people didn't see Sean Payton being a piece of shit against Tampa Bay for, I don't know, the last 5 seasons. I mean, they haven't seen that. So for it to be, taken to another level this season, and then ultimately this season to be for Tampa Bay to just knock them off in the playoffs, to be the team that stops them from getting it done because they can't do it every single year, and they couldn't do it again. And just for the Bucs to be that team, everybody knows how excited I'm getting. But
by the way, what other Bucs podcast would have a Taylor Swift reference within it? Cannon Fire Podcast, baby.
Let's go.
That's why you listen. That's why you download, hit subscribe on the YouTube and in your podcast platform.
Hell yeah, brother. If you're not watching, you're not listening.
I know how to sell it.
Yeah.
I did this for a little bit of time.
Really?
Did it well, too.
So I wanted to talk about the identity of this team as we kind of look forward to the NFC Championship and obviously the Super Bowl. I think we can kind of throw these games together. They're two drastically different games from this football team. But I think the identity coming into both of these games is, the Bucs are an underdog at this point. Not a lot of people picked them to beat MVP Aaron Rodgers and the Packers in Lambeau.
Not a lot of people picked them to beat New Orleans, dude.
Not a lot of exactly.
A lot of the national analysts, a lot of Bucs people, knew. Right,
they don't know shit.
Well, yeah, not a lot of people picked them to beat New Orleans. But when you're in the NFC Championship with Tom Brady against Aaron Rodgers in Lambeau in January, I think that narrative fits a little bit. And obviously with the Super Bowl, not a lot of people picked them to win that game. And I think it reflected on the tone of how teams entered the game, to be honest with you. Like when I see mic'd up and I see highlights of teams before they played the game, Saints players are singing and dancing and dapping each other up on the sidelines. Chiefs players were doing it. Packers players and the mic'd up Packers players were talking about, I can't wait to see y'all in Tampa. We're about to go win us a football game. And it just seemed a little bit more hunky-dory than a Bucs team who was there to handle some business. And that's what we saw on the field.
They were a team on a mission, right? I mean, I don't think there was any doubt in their mind. There was doubt in my mind. I'll admit it, right? I picked the Packers to win. I picked the Bucs to win the Super Bowl once they got there, but I picked the Packers to beat the Bucs. I'm not the type of person that's just going to pick the Bucs every time. The Packers were hot, right? The Packers had all the confidence in the world. Their offense was one of the best offenses in the NFL, and it was incredible because not everybody was looking at the Packers and thinking their confidence is at an all-time high, but they weren't really thinking about the Bucs. The Bucs team just beat the team that has literally lived rent-free in their heads and that they lost to 5 times in a row before this, right? They got embarrassed in their own stadium on national television. And then their former quarterback, who they drafted number 1 overall, was mocking them on their own field pretty much.
In their own locker room. I guess the visiting locker room, but you know what I mean.
And I mean this, and then they finally are able to get the job done against New Orleans. And you got to tell me, their confidence right now is through the roof, right? Especially on the defensive side of things, because I think we're going to talk about this defense against Green Bay yet again, rising to the occasion.
Yeah.
Their confidence is just at an all-time high, and they took it to Green Bay. Of course, the opening drive was beautiful, right? Tom Brady to Mike Evans for a touchdown. Took some time off the clock. So they started off good, and then they hit a little bit of a lull. But then the defense, yet again, Sean Murphy-Bunting has a huge turnover, right? And then finally, Finally, we talk about the no risk and no biscuit stuff. And right before the half, they go for it. They're not playing scared. They go for it, and they end up getting a touchdown to Scotty Miller, which I think really changes that whole game. I think if they don't score that touchdown, it might be a completely different game. I'm not even sure if the Bucs win, but that was just a huge play and a huge moment for this staff, and they came up big when they needed them.
What would have been 8? Let's see, 7. So take out the 3. It would have been 17-10.
Yeah.
Did I do that right? Or did my math?
No, you're right. It put them up
7-3.
24-10 in the half, right?
Yeah, if they would have got the 3.
It would have been, if they got 3, it would have been 17-10. If they didn't get anything, it was 14-10. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
So I asked you guys this before. Where was this game won?
Trenches.
Dude. And the biggest storyline of this game. Who expected it? Vita Vea, man.
Right.
Biggest freaking storyline. And how much is he going to play? And how much is the difference can he make? And he's the 350-pound guy who broke his ankle. I think, this is just me personally, I don't know if anyone has said this before. If not, I'll take credit for being the first person to say it on the Cannon Fire podcast. Can we stop with the they should have drafted Derwin James storyline at this point?
Dude.
Put it to bed.
So
it's dead. It's done.
We saw it not just in the NFC Championship game. This is a different defense with Vita Vea. And it's not just because he's 350 pounds. It's just he does so much for this team and these other players. He commands a double team every single time. And it's not that he just gets stood up. He pushes the center and the guard, whatever the double team comes from, he pushes them still back into the quarterback. We're back into where the hole's supposed to be. And then it lets the other guys do their job. So not having Vita Vea was a huge impact on the defense, and I still think the defense had a very good season. I think they had some ups and downs, but most consistent if you look at both sides of the ball, in my opinion. Outside the kicking game, but maybe not so much on coverage. That was a huge point in the game. You mentioned the no risk it, no biscuit. They did it 2 weeks in a row, y'all. I mean, they put up huge touchdowns in the NFC Championship, and then they did it in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, and this is a game where the refs put the flags away, so let them play. Let them play, and let's see who the better team is. And you're right, the storyline going into this game, I said this. I was nervous, and this was one game that I wasn't confident in for 2 reasons. One, the Vita Vea kind of changed it a little bit. I was like, maybe they can pull it off. But one, you mentioned it. Your biggest game of the year was potentially that matchup against the Saints because they beat you 2 times in a row. Or are you really going to show up in Lambeau?
Could be a letdown.
Yeah, they proved that they could, right? And this is a different football team than what we've seen in previous years.
I think it is.
I
think it is no coincidence talking about Vita Vea, his return at the best possible time. One, we only expected him to play 20-25 snaps that game. He played over 30.
Right.
The way that he
look at the impact of those plays.
Right.
Yeah.
But I think it's no coincidence that for weeks on end, we talked about how Shaq Barrett and Jason Pierre-Paul in particular need to show up a little bit more because one of them's a Pro Bowler. You can see how big of an award that was, but
and the other's getting paid $16 million.
Right. So, you need those guys to show up. And it's no coincidence that they play their best games of the playoffs when Vita Vea is in the middle of that line. Like, it's not rocket science at this point. Vita Vea is just a wrecking ball, and he does such a good job at opening things up for everybody else.
That's a Miley Cyrus reference.
Yeah.
There you go.
Dude,
so we got
I'm
Taylor
telling
Swift
you,
and Miley Cyrus.
Dude, Vea comes in like a wrecking ball. And here's what it also does.
I'm on a roll.
It not only makes JPP and Shaq Barrett better. You're getting less snaps from Steve McClendon and Nacho. There's more of a rotation, y'all. We saw in the Super Bowl, but why is Vea not out there? Oh, shit. Steve McClendon and Nacho are out there. They're doing their job, too.
Oh, yeah.
It makes everyone better. There's this rotation that the Bucs were missing, right? When it's Sue and Golston and Nacho and McClendon. It's not the same of having Vita Vea. It was huge. I mean, I was really emotional after that game because of they completely blew my expectations. And I knew then, regardless of who the matchup was going to be, because NFC Championship came before the AFC Championship, that Sunday, it didn't matter. I mean, this team was, and this is just, you hear it, team of destiny.
Right. It was their year, right?
To do it against New Orleans and then to come back the next week and smack Green Bay right in their face on their home turf.
After
and I
three
didn't mention
straight
the fact
turnovers to beat them the way that they did.
Right. And another reason too is obviously it's Aaron Rodgers, dude. And like we said about Tom Brady, it's tough to beat Brady twice in the same season. It's not easy to beat Aaron Rodgers twice. And the guy's
especially when you manhandle him, right?
Yeah. I mean, before Brady was my quarterback, I was like, Aaron Rodgers is one of the best of all time. He ain't the GOAT, but he's up there. He's mini GOAT at times.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, just this game was huge. There's Bucs fans that got to go up to the game. And I'm seeing videos like, damn, how'd y'all score those tickets?
Yeah, right,
man.
What a special scene, because Lambeau is historic.
Have you been there?
No, because I had the opportunity to go, and then pandemic happens. I'm like, I've literally my uncle has an apartment right near Lambeau where anytime I want to go to a game, I can get it hooked up. It just, things happen this year.
I mean, but then that game, Matt LaFleur makes the interesting decision to not go for it on fourth down. And just, I don't know when people are going to realize to not give Tom Brady, I understand sort of your logic behind it because they did have 3 timeouts and the 2-minute warning still, but like, come on, like it's you really think Tom Brady is going to get 2 first downs? Like seriously, in that moment.
You can explain the logic after the fact. It doesn't make it right? Yeah, and if it would have worked out for him, then people would have said it was the right move. Same thing we said about AB. If it works out, great. If it doesn't, then people will critique it. I mean, that's what we do week to week.
So then, and then the Tyler Johnson penalty, which I don't know why people got up in arms about. I understand that they were letting him play. I understand that, but when you're grabbing a jersey and you can see that jersey being ripped. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. In the same
like a better grip on him.
Yeah. He's like, I don't know what he was trying to do. And Kevin King had a rough day.
He was beat.
But dude, I don't know what the fuss was. Why everybody was saying, "Oh, just beat us Brady." Yeah, but what, the flag was late? Yeah, it was a little late, but that's a penalty. Like that is pass interference. That's a hold. Whatever, free first down, no matter what. So, and guess what? If he doesn't hold him, Tyler Johnson, that ball's there, and Tyler Johnson makes the catch, first down.
Yeah.
So don't give me that crap that it's Brady, it's the refs. They're trying to do in the Super Bowl right now. Like, and we'll get to that, but yeah, I mean the Bucs really played an outstanding game, and 3 interceptions from Tom Brady in the second half. And if you would have told, I think many of us that, I think we would have said, okay, the Bucs are probably going home. I think, but this defense really stood tall yet again in the second half, and in the fourth quarter, they stood tall and rose to the occasion, and that was the difference there.
Listen, the interceptions they're scenario based as well, right?
Yeah, they're like punts.
So what did the Packers do with them? What was it? 3 points?
I think 3 points. 3 interceptions.
3 or 6. It was one of those. Definitely wasn't a touchdown.
You're not giving the ball on the 20.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I mean, it's
not a pick six. It's
and defense is humming, dude. So yeah, I mean, you don't like to see the picks because obviously that takes points away from your team and opportunities that you have. But when the defense is stepping up, it ain't pick sixes, bro. So.
And listen, can we just kind of come clean here and admit something? I know nobody watches.
I like Miley Cyrus.
I know that nobody watches our podcast anyway, so I don't think anyone's going to hear us say this. But like, isn't it kind of nice? Isn't it kind of nice to get some of those calls that you didn't get in the past, just because you do have Tom Brady? Like, can we admit that we saw a couple of those this season?
I saw that in week 1. Week 1, I was like, this is different. Yeah. This is different.
Yeah.
They're going to call pass interference and not on Mike Evans?
What? They actually called pass interference. Yeah, multiple times they've done it too. Yeah, it was something. It was definitely a change of pace that you're like, oh, okay, this is a new era where we're truly living in here.
So here we are. It all comes down to this. Super Bowl 55 in Raymond James Stadium. The Buccaneers punch their ticket. They become the first team in NFL history to play a home Super Bowl, so they've already made history. Tom Brady is entering his 10th, yes, his 10th, I shit you not, his 10th Super Bowl, looking for his 7th ring in his first year with his brand new team. They're taking on the Chiefs, a team that's looking to run it back, Super Bowl champions, defending up until this point. And we have got ourselves on paper. A lot of people coming into this game expected this to be the best Super Bowl matchup that we have seen in ages. The ingredients are there. 2 high-powered offenses. You got a Bucs defense that could make the difference. And I remember saying all that week, I think this defense is going to surprise people. I don't think either team is going to score over 30. One of them scored over 30. The other one didn't get a touchdown, and we know how that game went. The Buccaneers get their second Lombardi. They hoisted in Tampa Bay, and 31-9. The defense did not allow a single touchdown for Pat Mahomes in Kansas City. This game, we talk about, the Saints game being the most complete game that they have played. This game by itself, 31-9 against the number one scoring offense in the NFL. Are you kidding me? What a statement for the Bucs on the biggest stage that the NFL can offer to wrap up the season and ultimately crown themselves Super Bowl champs, right?
I like when my team plays in quote unquote boring Super Bowls.
Yeah,
It sure as hell ain't boring to me.
Right? Yeah.
I don't care about a 3-point game. I don't care about going to overtime because then I'm pulling my hair out. I want to beat their ass.
Best Super Bowl of all time.
Hey, look, I'll drop Mike here. Trenches.
Yeah. Again.
Both sides. I'm sorry. Offensive line, defensive line showed up. Huge. Absolutely huge. One of the and not to discount what the linebackers did and what the secondary did. And what Gronk did from not only from a receiving standpoint, but the difference that he made to this offensive line. The way that playoff Lenny looked, Rojo in his time. I'm telling y'all, this is a special year. Enjoy it. This was special. There's going to be many stories told, documentaries, whatever down the road. They're probably happening already.
Yeah.
This was an incredible season. Enjoy it. And then let's see what this team can do moving forward, and let's get back to it. But enjoy. Oh, my God. What a season. What an absolutely amazing season, especially after the bye week, y'all. Didn't lose a game. Just enjoy it.
Didn't lose a game and actually only scored over 30 points every time except for one game.
Yes.
Every time.
So, as Chris Jericho would say, Bucs fans, drink it in, man.
Drink it in, man.
Oh, so incredible. Just incredible.
The Bucs defense added Kansas City Chiefs offense to the list after that game. So,
and I don't think it was surprising. Just like we said, guys, in that previous matchup, you saw what the defense did in the second half, and they were missing components. So
yeah. Jamel Dean, their fastest corner against one of the fastest teams in the league, and Vita Vea. Yeah, they were missing those two guys. So
because your expectations when it's Kansas City is Patrick Mahomes is
just going to throw a bunch. And,
he's the best quarterback.
He's going to make plays. If you get pressure in the pocket, he's going to roll out and get a first down, which we saw him do once or twice.
And you got Hill and you got Kelsey. I didn't expect the Chiefs to beat Buffalo, y'all. I thought we were playing Buffalo. That was a completely different Buffalo team that showed up in Kansas City versus what I watched in previous weeks. So I don't know what the hell happened, but with the beat up Mahomes and with the way that this team being the Bucs, that this was getting set up, I knew they were going to win the football game. I didn't expect it in that fashion.
Yeah,
but you knew this was happening.
I was kind of glad that it was Kansas City instead of Buffalo, because I think I said this on the show already earlier, like last week, I think. But because then they're the defending champs, right? And they were 14-2, and their other loss was to a Chargers team where they didn't play any of their starters. So I mean, pretty much they lost one game this year when their starters were in, and a lot of them were convincing. I didn't want anybody to say, well, if Kansas City was in, since you played Buffalo, that's why they won. If Kansas City was in, it would have been different. No, that's the defending champs got dominated, and now they're knocked off the throne. Chiefs Kingdom's no more.
Something else.
What does the nature boy say before you get to your point, right?
You gotta to be the man. You gotta beat the man, right?
So who was the man?
The Chiefs.
And now who's the man?
The Bucs.
And Tate. That's the show, folks. I mean,
hey, Buffalo, Tampa next year, and then for Josh Allen to be the GOAT, you got to beat the GOAT. It's not. I mean, he's not going to be the GOAT for one win, but. That storyline is yet to come, y'all. I'm telling you. I know Buffalo wanted Tom Brady so bad.
Yeah,
man.
I think Buffalo, over the last 18 years, I think they've beaten Brady 3 times. I think Yeah, I think they've only beaten them 3 times. So like, I saw one tweet. It was like I think it might have been the NFC Championship week, and they were like, "I just want the Bucs and Bills to win, just so Tom Brady can rip the hearts out of the city of Buffalo,
Buffalo
one last time."
Hey, no shade against Buffalo fans. That community and that's
Awesome.
That fan base is incredible, and they've
they've
dealt with a lot as well. So there's some similarities between what we've dealt with in Tampa and what Buffalo has dealt with.
Now, we have talked plenty about this Super Bowl, the game itself, the consequences of it, what's come from it. We've talked about it plenty over our last 2 episodes, so I think we've broken down enough here. But I do want to take away one more thing about this Kansas City team that we saw during the Super Bowl. And I think it goes back to that cockiness narrative. I don't even know if it was so much cockiness, but good God almighty, this might have been the sloppiest game they have ever played. It seemed like for the first quarter, every single play, if you saw a ball headed in the direction of a Buccaneers wide receiver, maybe the guy wearing number 13, I mean, you had a defender hugging him, like grabbing his waist and slow dancing with him.
Yeah,
and
but
once the refs
according to other people, it was just because Tom Brady was there and they didn't.
Right. But like once the refs actually start calling that stuff, and we realize that maybe it's not rigged. Maybe Kansas City is actually shooting themselves in the foot here because they can't play the way that they've been wanting to play. Because I know that throughout the playoffs, the referees had a really weird tendency of calling a game one way or another, right? That didn't happen in the Super Bowl, and ultimately KC just shot themselves in the foot at the worst possible time. But they came into this Super Bowl just sloppy, like just undisciplined from what we saw, and it cost them the game a little bit earlier than a lot of people expected.
Hit the nail on the head, Rhett. They were undisciplined in this football game. And maybe it's because of the incident and there were distractions that happened leading up to it.
Yeah.
Off the field stuff they were dealing with. They kept their same travel routine. They came in, typically when they would not come in for a Super Bowl, but pandemic. And, I think they kept the same travel patterns as they would if it were a regular season football game. They were the undisciplined football team, and people can whine and bitch and complain from opposing fan bases about the Bucs didn't have calls against them in the playoffs. But the change, not only from what we saw that we've called out specifically on this podcast, the change that we've seen in this football team is also they're becoming a disciplined football team. We did not have that. And when you are an undisciplined football team, and when you have that reputation in the NFL, you are going to get calls against you. And we as Bucs fans could look at games after game and like, that's bullshit. Mm-hmm. I mean, you guys probably did podcast episodes last season, the year before. I'm like, no, it's bullshit. It was a bullshit call. They don't call it against them. They just call it against us. You get that reputation as an undisciplined football team. You're gonna get flags. This was different. And again, it set, everything was going right in the Bucs direction, but they deserve credit as well because they went from a very undisciplined football team to a disciplined football team. And I think Ryan Jensen runs the show on that, y'all. Smart enough to bait the other team. He did it again. Chris Jones. He got Chris Jones.
Oh, yeah.
I think he got a couple Saints.
Right.
Smart, right? Smart.
Yeah.
Smart and disciplined versus stupid and undisciplined is what we saw in the past.
I think the turning point of consistency with discipline that this team was able to produce over 4 quarters of a game was the Chicago game, was when Tom Brady ripped everybody a new asshole on the sideline because they killed a drive by themselves.
And and you can say it as evidence because afterwards penalties weren't as much of an issue.
Yeah, wasn't the next week like the first game in franchise history?
They did not have to commit a penalty.
Didn't have a penalty. It only took them 45 years, but they got it done. I mean, here we are.
And I'm not sure how much the lack of crowd noise had when it comes to pre-snap penalties for teams across the league this year. But I can tell you, I mean, how many times have we watched it where the Bucs would start first and 15, or the opposing team would start first and 5 because someone jumped offside. So I don't know how much of an impact that made, but it was evident this year in pre-snap penalties, which are huge. Immediately set you back.
We literally had an episode titled last year after week 5 when they lost to the Saints, Cajun Fried Screw Job. This is because, talking about when you're saying it's BS and stuff. Yeah, a lot of it was, a lot of the calls were BS, but when you're undisciplined, you're not going to get those calls. Like you're not going to get the benefit of the doubt there, right? From the ref. So, and that's a big turning point. There's a lot of reasons, and a lot of reasons, everything has to go right for you to win a Super Bowl, right? Like everything, there's so many things that have to go right, which is why it's so difficult to win, right? Like it's so difficult because everything has to be at the right moment, and discipline is one of the biggest ones. It's definitely a top 3, I think. It was a fantastic season. And that pretty much puts a cap, I think, on the season review. All in all, it's a season that all 3 of us, I think, we all said at some point in this podcast, we did not expect this team to win the Super Bowl. But yet, here we are.
Definitely a season that Bucs fans are not going to forget. A historic season.
Okay, so let me ask you, what was Fisher? I wanted to ask you this because you sat through both of them. What was more enjoyable to you, the 0-2 one or this one?
They're both special, but the first I think is always the most special.
That's what I was kind of thinking too.
Yeah, and I sat in the stands much longer going into that Super Bowl, and I was a season ticket holder at the time, where I'm not a season ticket holder anymore. So that was more special. That was more special as a fan. I would say that this was special in its own way because of how unbelievably unique and amazing that it was, the run that they went on. And it was special for me as someone who used to create content and say, I never got to experience this. This is cool. I'm glad that you all who create content are able to experience this, and let's see what y'all do with it, because it's completely different than what we've dealt with. And this came out of nowhere. I feel like it did. And people, can say, well, clearly this was the direction the team was going, but I didn't have the expectations. We talked about it. Number 1 is sweeter. It doesn't mean that number 2 is any less sweet. But there were more defining moments for me as a fan. The Rondé pick 6, the You Go Joe, getting the first, the respect given to Coach Dungy and Coach Gruden. That team that was very special, who deserved that, the Derek Brooks and the other players that were there. This is also special. It's just in a different way.
I think there's a lot of people, obviously younger people, who didn't get to see that 0-2 run the way that, some other guys did. A lot of people are going to look at moments during this playoff run and maybe look at them in the same light as, a Rondé pick 6. Obviously not to that degree, because it sends the Bucs to their first ever Super Bowl. It ends up until that point 26 years of just, awfulness. But that Devin White interception against New Orleans, I mean, I know it was, the third quarter, early fourth quarter, but you kind of knew that game was done. There were moments in the NFC Championship game that you're not going to forget. I mean, even the Super Bowl, Rob Gronkowski having 2 touchdowns, Tampa Tom in full effect, by the way, just jawing at Tyrann Mathieu and then throwing a touchdown directly at him. Like, that's the most savage shit I have ever seen from Tom Brady. And I'm glad that Tampa, gives him a platform.
Is that a Megan Thee Stallion reference?
Oh, Jesus Christ.
We got them all, man.
Is he classy bougie ratchet?
Yeah, it's the Pop Star Hour on the Cannon Fire podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, I think that's going to wrap up our season review, as Evan had said. Chris, I've got one more question for you, if that's okay. I know we've kept you about 30 minutes over your curfew, and I do apologize. But if you want to make it short and sweet, this is... unless the Bucs make it to the big dance next year, this is, your last podcast appearance. Is there anything you kind of want to say as a send-off, maybe where people can find your content if you're still pushing stuff out on Twitter? How can they link up with you on Peloton? I know you're going to have plenty of time to challenge people on your Peloton now.
That's a good point.
What have you got in the works? Is Mr. Chris Fisher, former Bucs podcast extraordinaire?
It's nice to finally be officially retired from podcasting, because I did another podcast for 5.5 years and it was ridiculously successful, and I met a lot of great people because of it. But it's nice for the first time ever to not be pushing out audio content. I don't tweet as much as I used to. Usually if I do, it's pointing out how Rick Stroud has beef with Dan Mullen, which will get you blocked on Twitter. But go back and look at the history and tell me that he doesn't have beef with Dan Mullen. Oh, I'm sorry. But at BBP Chris, if you want to follow me on Twitter, I don't really take Twitter too seriously anymore. I think it's it's become a little bit ridiculous. But shout out to the people who, if you're a content creator, you absolutely have to utilize it to get your content out there. It's an avenue that is definitely necessary to do what you have to do. I appreciate the Bucs content creators who kind of, I didn't have a torch. I just was passionate about a topic and I felt like talking about it. And I listened to other people and I wanted to get better at what I did. So I challenge folks who are creating content to try and get better at what you're doing and choose the avenue that works for you and try to stand out. I appreciate what you all do from a Cannon Fire podcast standpoint. I think you all have one of the most organized, well thought out, non-Homer-ish. I don't mean that as a knock against other shows, because again, I don't listen to Bucs content. But I like what you all do from an objective standpoint, right? It's what I tried to do as a content creator. So if you want to get at me on the Peloton, that community is all about support. But you can find me at I Am That Fish, which is my Peloton leaderboard name. And I'm hitting up 1,300 rides coming up soon, y'all. So Peloton has become a huge passion because it has changed my life, and I'm big, and I'm essentially, it's the first time I'm not wearing, I have Peloton shorts on, but I'm not going to stand up for y'all because I'm going to show off my legs. This is the first time I'm not wearing like Peloton gear from head to toe, because I say, be the brand, right? That's what it's all
He's
about.
got the socks on. Don't let him lie to you. He's got some Peloton
Who wears socks
on.
in Florida? Come on, man.
that's
Flip flops.
Evan,
Rhett, I appreciate you both, man. I think y'all do good work. And I appreciate our conversations that we have, and I'm sorry for being a dick and not wanting to come on, but I really didn't want to do Bucs podcasts.
No, yeah, it's understandable, and just wanted to say, thank you for, because it's pretty special to me, because like I said, I've listened to the Bucs Brief podcast, and I'll actually never forget the day when it was in the morning, and I was just about to walk to school, and I'd listened to your like goodbye episode, and I was like, man, that sucks, man, and
I appreciate it, dude. I get kind words, man, and I just tried to do the best that I could do. I'm no different. I will say something that I think we tried to do, and I say we because I'll put Derek, and Derek did it long before I did from What the Buck. We tried to create an avenue where you all as Bucs fan content creators would have some respect from the organization. And the way to do that is to be professional. And I tried, man. I tried to get training camp credentials. I did the best that I could. And to do that, you have to be respectful, regardless of if you like an individual. I know there's people in the media right now that are getting brutalized on social media. If you ever want to get your foot in the building and do it the right way, you do have to have a certain amount of respect. And that's what I tried to do. And that's what hopefully started paving the way for others who may have had that opportunity. It was very challenging when there was a very anti-media, evil media voice that was out there, and it really ruined a lot of things. And I'll be completely honest with y'all. It hurt a lot of people. And it wasn't the right thing to be done. And it wasn't right for a credentialed media outlet to continue to produce or to publish the content, and for the organization to not respond to it. That really soured me. So I'm sorry, to fans who may have followed my content and maybe have seen a shift in my attitude, because it did hurt, man, when there was some bad things that were said about certain people and there was no punishment that was given from an organization. So I lost a little bit of respect to the franchise, not players and all that, but just from a background standpoint. So I want people to understand that. Do it the right way. You all are doing it the right way. Have respect, and good things will happen for you. Just keep working hard, hustle, and set yourself apart.
Oh yeah, Chris. It means a lot, man. Like
I
we
get
said,
emotional, y'all. Sorry.
No, you're good, dude. Like we said, we're gonna end things on a high note, but it does mean a lot for you to come onto our podcast, and we do appreciate your support and of course the kind words. But ladies and gentlemen, that's just about going to do it for this episode of the Cannon Fire Podcast. It is an action-packed 2+ hours, so if you've listened to this point, we truly do appreciate you. For everybody live on YouTube, by the way, we haven't talked to our live chat very much, but all of you guys chiming in, we really do appreciate you. Leadus Productions, Willie Beeman been hanging out for a while, Russell Weeks, I mean, just a lot of people. Will the Brewer, we really do appreciate you guys' support. If you haven't already subscribed to the YouTube channel, it is the best way to experience the show. Of course, we do live streams just like this. We do highlight videos. We do the CF hotline shows where we call in or jump on here and take your calls. And then, of course, we're dropping 2 episodes a week during the regular season. As for what's ahead, I don't really know. We're just going to kind of take things as they come. If there's news, we're going to talk about it. But I think, we're going to kind of cap off the 2020 season coverage with this show. And like we said so many times up until this point, we truly do appreciate each and every one of you who has been here on the ride with us. Check out the show on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. All of those are Cannon Fire Podcast. Best place to go for updates on the show, and of course, Buccaneer news as it happens. Speaking of Bucs news as it happens, you can follow my co-host Evan on Instagram at Bucs_daily, the #1 Buccaneers fan page on Instagram. You can also find him on Twitter at EvanNFL. And last but not least, you can find myself, Instagram and Twitter at Rhettakus, RHETTAKUS. If you follow me, I will follow you back. So that's it. Super Bowl champions, take it in, ladies and gentlemen. We'll talk to you when we talk to you. But I am your host, Rhett Matthew, signing off from my co-host, Evan Wanish, and our special guest, Chris Fisher. Until next time, as always, go Bucs.